Shropshire CCG and NHS Telford and Wrekin CCG. Got a full agenda today. We'll just go through with apologies. We've got Martin Allen, who is unavailable today, and then we have Alison Smith, who's joining us later on in the meeting, and then Julie Davis and Sam Tilley, who will be joining us around 9:30 because of Gold meeting. Can I ask about declarations of interest over and above those that are listed in the online declarations of interest? Anything in relation to papers in today's meeting? I'm looking in the box and looking for hands, and there's none of those, so that's good. I'm going to start off with some introductory comments. I've made a few notes because there's a few things going on. So obviously, the last time we met in public with the public was last March. We met at the University Centre in Shrewsbury, and obviously things have changed a lot since then. We're currently, obviously, we're still in the pandemic, but we are seeing decreasing numbers of cases now in what is phase 3 for us, the peak 3. But we've still got a large number of people in hospital, 70 to 80 people in hospital and 15 in ITU. But today, what we'll have in the meeting is that we'll hear that the impact of the pandemic on further services. So in terms of, for example, waiting times, we've seen 26-week and 52-week rates rise, and the latest figures are there's over 11,000 26-week waits and 3,700 52-week waits in our system. And so that's huge numbers. And we're also seeing increasing sort of impact on mental health, and certainly in practice we're seeing rising demand and levels of need around mental health. So we are beginning to see some of the bigger, longer term impacts of the pandemic, which we would expect after it's gone on for a year. Today, we face a lot of challenges, and today is important because it's actually the last meeting of both CCGs. So both CCGs were created in 2013, so NHS Telford and Wrekin and NHS Shropshire. And throughout the last few years, we've worked with a large number of people on behalf of the populations in both Telford and in Shropshire, and we've come together since August to work together in our new structure with this meeting in common. And from the 1st of April, we'll be forming a new CCG, which will be NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. And what we're seeing over the years is a decline in the number of CCGs. Apparently, from the 1st of April, there's only going to be 106 CCGs, which is down from over 200 in 2013. And 15 systems will just have one CCG. On the horizon, we obviously, and in our day-to-day thoughts, is the white paper, the integration innovation, working together to improve health and social care for all. That proposes moving towards ICSs and removing CCGs and moving the commissioning functions of CCGs into the ICS. Clearly, system working is the way forward, but we must be careful not to lose the gains that we've had for the public and for clinician involvement that we've made since 2012-13, when CCGs were first in shadow form and then started. Alongside the white paper, there's also a paper around the provider selection regime. And whilst that brings a lot of good things about collaboration and avoiding the need to procure and go out to tender, it does show a massive increase suggested in the use of AQP, and something that I think as a system moving forward we need to have a good look at, because that could risk destabilising some of the services that we provide by taking away some of the slightly easier to provide high volume services and doing them outside of the hospital, which we must need to encourage, but obviously we need to balance that with the need to maintain financial balance for us. As well as being the last meeting for the CCG, more personally, today is the last meeting for two people really. Keith, who is Shropshire CCG's audit chair and the lay member of governance for both for Shropshire, and working on both boards. Keith's contribution over many years, with his considered input, is going to be very difficult to replace. He will be missed by us, and his leadership of the audit committee and his advice on finances with his background in audit is a huge resource that will be the CCG will be losing. I'm sure moving forward, Jeff is going to be the single lay member for governance across both CCGs, and he will, I'm sure he will attempt to fill those shoes, but Keith will leave a big gap, and we're very sorry to be losing Keith, but thank him for all the input and time that he's given over the many years to us. Also, Dave Evans, our AO, is moving on. Dave has been the AO for Telford and Wrekin for over 8 years, and has built up has done a huge amount of work in Telford over that period of time. He's also done some work across both systems initially, leading Future Fit, moving us to where we are, addressing the finances and staff, and working constructively in the past with the AOs in Shropshire. Dave probably also has the dubious honour, and it is a dubious honour, of being the only person to be the AO of Shropshire twice. So we are very grateful for Dave having his previous attempt, but also the last year or so has been tremendous. Really, we've done a huge amount. We've achieved what some might think would be impossible in getting together the two CCG memberships to agree to form a single structure in common, and then to agree to become one CCG. So there's been a lot of warm messages. I've heard a lot of positive things for Dave. He will be missed, and I think that's probably all the point I want to end, that the system will miss Dave, but Dave's input and Keith's input and all of our input over the last few years has been massive, and I think that we all should look with pride on what we've done for both Telford and Shropshire over the last number of years. And moving forward, I wish John all the best luck leading the new CCG, and we will have in place an AO that will work alongside John to take forward the agenda, and also to protect commissioning and to protect the things that we've put in place over the last years, since 2012-13, and make sure that the new system moving forward has those positive things embedded in them. So thank you very much to Keith, and particularly thanks to Dave from Telford and Wrekin particularly, but also from Shropshire as well. So thank you. So we now move on to Dave, who's sits at Accountable Officers Report. So Dave.
Thank you very much, Julian, and thank you for those kind words, which I will respond to in a few minutes. A couple of things I just wanted to pick up first, and some of these we may well pick up later on in the agenda, but I thought it would be wrong for me not to highlight a couple of things now. One, of course, is the vaccination programme, and we now have vaccinated well over 200,000 people across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. To put that into a slight context, because I was looking last week, on the 9th of January, we'd vaccinated around 11,000 people. So we vaccinated close to 200,000 people in about 8 or 9 weeks, which I think is a phenomenal achievement. And I would like to express my personal thanks, and I'm sure on behalf of the board, for all of the staff involved, both within the CCG and across all system partners, and the voluntary sector and other statutory organisations like the fire service who have contributed, but also local authorities and, as I say, other NHS partners. That is a phenomenal achievement. Certainly, I haven't seen the league table in the last couple of days, but the last league table I saw, Telford and Wrekin CCG was the #1 in the country for over 65s, and Shropshire was number 5 or 6 in the country for over 65. So we have done incredibly well from what we all recognise was a fairly slow start. So I'd like to say that. Secondly, I'd like to comment around transforming care and learning disabilities. As the governing body will know, we've been in escalation for some time. The team led by Claire have been working incredibly hard on this. We had a escalation meeting about 3 weeks ago. I think if we stick to the plan we have, I would expect the CCG to come out of escalation possibly in the first quarter of the new year, certainly by the second quarter, if not within the first quarter. And again, I think that's a really significant achievement, given some of the challenges we've faced this year. So again, thanks to Claire and all of the team involved in pulling that together. I would just like to let the governing body know that Zena and I are meeting with the chair of the independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation for Telford next week. It was going to be last week, but it had to be rearranged. I don't think there's anything particular of concern in relation to the CCG in terms of that. It is a routine meeting, but we will update the governing body afterwards. And just a couple of other things. Julian was slightly incorrect when he said this was the last board meeting for 2 people, because of course it's the last board meeting for 3 people, because it is Julian's last board meeting. And both on a personal level, but also I know on behalf of the board, I would like to thank Julian for his contribution, a huge contribution to Shropshire CCG and latterly Telford and Wrekin CCG over a number of years since the start of the CCGs in 2000, well, creation of CCGs in 2013, but including shadow year. I wouldn't wish to underestimate in any way the contribution Julian has made, both as a GP, but certainly in the context of his role as a CCG board member and latterly as chair of the 2 CCGs and Shropshire CCG. His huge contribution in helping me personally, and I know other AOs and executive teams, drive the agenda we've wanted to drive in terms of looking at how to improve services for the population we serve. So a huge personal thank you, Julian, but I know I'm saying that on behalf of the board as a whole. And if I could just respond to, if you'll give me forbearance to respond to Julian's kind words to me, and I ought to say thank you to Keith as well, obviously, as chair of audit over a number of years. It's been a huge privilege to lead the CCGs in the time I've done that. I mean, obviously Telford since inception, and Shropshire, as Julian said twice. It has been a huge privilege. I've worked with some fantastic people. Boards have always been incredibly supportive, and the governing bodies have always been incredibly supportive, both as individuals and collectives, and that's made the job a whole lot easier. I will miss people, possibly more than some of the other institutions in the NHS that I might miss. I think some of that I won't, I'm sure about that, but it has been a huge privilege. I think we've made some enormous improvements over the years. And, you know, even in this last board meeting, I can point to vaccination and transforming care of how we've started to make a significant difference for our population. So genuine thank you to each and every one of you, and to every member of staff I've worked with over the past 9 years, and to all governing body members I've had the privilege of working with over the last 9 years. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for those kind words as well. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of January. There's obviously they're the same minutes for both CCGs. So if I take them first for accuracy and correction, so page of the actual minutes, page 1 to 5. Someone in the forward box. So that's me else. That's fine. That's fine. So any put your hand up if there's any corrections or problems with page 1 to 5, and then pages 6 through to 10. And then pages 11 through to 15, and then page 16 through to page 20. John Pepper.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I'm not quite sure which pages, but the section under ASD and ADHD, 11.60. And I noticed that there was going to be a paper going to gold regarding re-establishing Children's and Young People's Partnership Board involving mental health, physical health, patient and carer groups, Health Watch and schools. And I didn't see it as actually an action coming out of that, but whether that was being brought back as to the result of that paper going to gold. That's 11.60.
don't think there was an action, but presumably at some point that would be back. There would be something coming to the governing body. Claire, is that? I've got Claire's hands up.
Yeah, the setup of the group has been approved. It is being arranged, and it will come back to governing body. The terms of reference can be circulated for information. That will start next year, so there'll be four meetings per year. So it'll start in the new financial year, John.
Okay.
So there should be an action there. So we'll add in an action about feeding back about that, and then the feedback on that is that you have met. There is a paper. And an action arising from that is you'll circulate the terms of reference to members.
Yeah.
And then they'll be brought back in the future to a future board meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Thank you. And then a small point in 19.3, it's just wording. It should, in 19.3, should just simply say in line with. It's just a typo, but that's it. Thank you.
In line with, yes, that's the second slide down. Yeah.
Within the stand inspection report section, yeah.
Thank you. Mike, is this on the comment on the first 20 pages? We've still got 2 pages left, I think, for comments. Is it a comment or correction? Mike, you're on mute, I think. Still can't hear you, Mike. I can see you now. Can't hear you though. Says your microphone's on. Perhaps if you want to see if you can get your microphone working and then come back. Lynn's also put a comment in the comments. Obviously they're difficult. We won't routinely pick those up. So if you have got comments, you can raise a hand and say them. That would be brilliant. Then Sandra can read them down. So there was. So yeah, we'll add to. I'm sure Claire will make a note of that and feedback to Health Watch about the partnership board. So if we move on to pages 21 to 24, any comments or corrections? No. If not, we move on to the matters arising. So the first one was some actions for Dave. This is item GB 2101-004 about circulating the draft ICS application to check whether it can be published in public and to update the members on the ICS application and the outcome following the regional and national panel meeting. So Dave, I wonder if there's no update on that prior. So you're going to give that update now?
I can give that update now, Julian. I think we did circulate it. I'm hoping we have, and if we didn't, I apologise. And I will make sure it goes round. I thought I'd arranged for it to be circulated. So if someone could just confirm that for me, that would be helpful. In relation to the other 2 actions, we can't publish it yet because it's a draft, and we've not yet had feedback from the national meeting. There was some feedback from the regional meeting, and those actions are being undertaken, and I'll brief the board separately about those. But there was nothing significant that causes concern.
Okay. I've just seen,
unsurprisingly, a lot was around money.
I've just seen Mike's comment, which he could have verbalised, was about item 11.61 and any further progress. But Mike, I'm sure that will come up during the quality performance report rather than the matters arising, so we can deal with that then. The next action has been completed on the feedback, and I think Julie has now joined us. I haven't had the message from Julie, because the next action is 006, which is Dr. Davis to share data on the ambulance crews on scene with times with members, and the comment on the minutes on the agenda is that the data's being received and there'll be a verbal update to be given at the meeting. And like what said Julie, you're there, yes?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. We've only just received the data after, as you know, months of asking. Initial analysis has shown that there does seem to be some variation between time on scene between the more rural parts of the county and more urban, but we've just got to do some further analysis to take out the site-to-site transfers of patients done by ambulance just to confirm that. But I will bring a specific paper summarising that to the next governing body to formally close that action, if that's okay.
That'll come to the May meeting as a paper.
Yes,
yes, that's action there. The next action for Claire is coming to the May meeting. On the next page, item 0.123, about the niche report. It's disappointing that it's not coming back to this meeting. Very disappointing, really, because we've waited it for a long time. I'm not entirely sure how COVID has impacted on preparing and presenting the report back to us, but that presumably then will come to the May meeting. Yeah.
Yes, it should do. I've got a meeting this week with Niche, and it is COVID impacts on staff availability to do the work. Okay.
So next one is item GB 2011-126, which is going to be in the meeting. It's combined with the COVID update, so that's on the agenda. Next item, it's been completed around Health Watch and involved in the system oversight group and discussion with Health Watch representatives. And then the next item is included on the March meeting in part 1, so that's fine. Moving on to the actions 010. Again, the first action is complete. And as is the next 1, 2, 3 items. Then we come on to the quality, which seems to be the same action as the other action about the niche reports. Obviously, we've had an update on that. The following actions are, next action is complete, and the action again has been completed. That's added onto the report. And then there was Mrs. Young and Ms. Scrawley to meet to further discuss Health Watch running a hot topic in neurology, and that's a meeting has been arranged with the quality team members. Have we got a date for that meeting, or is that?
Can you hear me? It's Lynn.
Yes.
Shropshire. That meeting hasn't happened. I think there's a conversation to be had around that, and I also after this meeting would like to pick up with Zena about the previous action as well, so we can just understand where we're at with those two conversations.
Sure, be delighted to do that, Lynn. Thank you.
That's about Health Watch and feeding in about SOAG, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it's not SOAG, it's the system quality oversight arrangements, which are under review from an ICS perspective. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. Next matter arising is digital report update item 0.16, which was about, I think that's completed. Is it Steve? Dr. James double checked whether the case management record will be supported by the new shared care records. And that's complete, so we've confirmed that is included in that. Next item is Dr. James to arrange to have the information on the digitalised respects form recirculated to practice for information. We haven't got an update on that. Just so is that.
I have to apologise. I will get that action immediately.
So fine, thank you. Next action is complete. Next item of the agenda in May, and as is the subsequent one. Move on to matter arising 0.17. Mr. Trenchard to include in the primary care newsletter link to further information on psychological health and wellbeing support from staff. There's no comment that that's completed. Do we know whether that's been completed? I don't think Steve's here, so unless he's arrived. No, Steve's not here. So I don't know if Claire Parkin can update on that, whether that's been included in a primary care newsletter.
I'll have to check, Julian. I'll find out and complete it as an action.
Yeah, it would be good. Obviously, I think they do get discussed as execs, don't we? So I'd assume they'd all be updated with something. So presumably that has been discussed at execs and not been noted that we may not have an answer to it. So it's fine. Next action on the 10 reports complete, and there's 2 actions for the May meeting. That's next meeting. And then there is an urgent item 0.19, about the integrated urgent care implementation review. Claire Barker to confirm whether palliative care services commissioned by SAP or the CCGs. It says March meeting, then it says to be confirmed whether it's been completed, TBC.
So Julian, I have sent tried to get a response to that, and nobody seems to know. I think it might be a mixed picture, that some elements are commissioned by SAF and some commissioned by the CCG. I've just re-emailed Tracy Jones, who's leading the end of life work, just to see if she can clarify which elements it is. And if I get a response back, I'll pick that up as part of the meeting. But apologies, I didn't pick that up ready to report this morning.
I suppose the question is whether SAF contribute towards Shropshire's cost, because obviously the phone line's a separate number, but when you're seen by the doctor or one of the AMPs through Shropshire, who would be on duty for Shropshire that weekend. So
yeah, that's what I've asked Tracy to do a breakdown of, because she's a bit closer to that service than we are.
Okay, and then the final matters arising has been complete, so that's good. Then follows in the agenda some of the answers to the previous questions from the last public board meeting, which we put on the website 2 weeks after the board meeting. We've had no public comments, no public questions for today's meeting, as far as I'm aware. Is that's correct?
No, Julian, we've had no questions from the public this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So right on time, we move on to the quality and performance report presented by Zena and Julie.
Thanks, Julian. With regard to the performance element of the report, I just wanted to draw a few points to the governing body's attention. One is particularly linked to our A&E performance, which we know is an ongoing challenge for our system, that there is a requirement for the system to produce an improvement plan to demonstrate that we can get to 85% during 21-22. And we're working with system colleagues to do that. And not least, we've also got to bear in mind that there's all the new potential urgent care metrics that are likely to follow in shadow form. So there will be expecting some change in that reporting over the next year. With regard to referral to treatment times, obviously the ongoing pandemic has continued to impact that, but I can report that now that key triggers have been met within the acute and the COVID demand has reduced, that Shrewsbury and Telford hospitals are now in the position to start to reopen their theatres and recovery areas. So they have been able to schedule P2s and cancer again in the Shrewsbury site. The restoration at PRH will take a little longer, but those plans are now coming together and provide us a meeting weekly on their recovery. So we'll definitely have a much better position, more detailed position to bring back to the governing body next time in terms of the plans for that recovery. Although I would like to say the backlogs are considerable, so it will take some considerable time, and we will also need the certainty from the centre in terms of the national funding for the recovery. One thing that has worked well as that's come out of the COVID work has been the combined waiting list around orthopaedics. That is working well, and we've had confirmation this morning that for the P2s for orthopaedics, they will have all been scheduled and likely to have been treated by mid-April, which is good news. We have continued to use the Nuffield for cancer and P2s, and again, we are limited in some of the patients that can go there, but all of the ones that can are going there, and we continue to fully utilise the capacity through to the end of March. With regards to cancer, I'm pleased to say that even since writing the report, we've had further improvement in the booking times for the 2 weeks, and we're now down to booking at 17 days locally, and hope that by the end of March we will be at 14 days. However, we've got the detailed paper on that next on the agenda. And then finally, with regard to mental health, I have got a performance assurance manager starting in a trial role from next week, and I've asked them to focus on our mental health actions and improvement, because I'm conscious that that's an area that we've not given sufficient focus to over recent months, but now we've got capacity in place, we're able to do that and prioritise it. So with that, I'll pass on to Zena for the quality section.
Okay, thank you. If we do Zena first, then we can come back to questions on it all together because we often overlap. Thank you, Julie. Zena?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just speaking to the executive summary. There is detail in the report and happy to take questions. So just to state really clearly that staff remain our most challenged provider on the patch and cause for concern, but we've got a number of governance measures in place. I think we understand the issues that are being faced and how those are being dealt with more so. We continue to request assurances around incident management in particular, and what I've undertaken to do is a selective review of certain incidents that predate my time in the CCG, so sort of just predating early 2020 to check how actions have been embedded into practice, and on that note that was raised at an internal meeting at the trust yesterday, and they also are undertaking a similar piece of work, particularly around maternity, but I won't dwell on maternity in this part because we've got a separate report on that. There are a number of COVID outbreaks, and there is high assurance received to the SOAG meeting in particular around the management of those cases. That of particular note is the definitions for attribution, and patients have to be inpatients for 8 days or longer in order for COVID positive position to be attributed to hospital acquired in either possible or definite categories. And we continue to support the incident management approach to outbreaks. We reviewed over the last few months the quality accounts for 2019 to 20 and provided responses back to all of our 4 main providers. We have continued to pause our quality assurance visits across most of our providers, and we are doing visits on a exception and escalated basis only, and where there are concerns, and we are continuing to triangulate information to allow us to have line of sight of quality of care in the absence of being able to go into clinical settings ourselves. We are still undertaking clinical visits for certain care home and domiciliary care and other settings in association with our role as part of the health protection response to COVID. And just to say that I've managed to secure some additional staffing for the IPC team on a temporary basis to help support the COVID work. I will pause there. There is detail, as I say, in the report, and happy to take questions.
Questions for Zena or Julie? I can't see any hands up at the moment. I've got Adam Pringle.
Just one, and I'm not sure if this is the right place in the meeting, but just looking at the testing backlog and looking at locally, as an example, locally the endoscopy surveillance for Barrett's esophagus has been every 2 years, or at least that's what the letters to me from the hospital say. And looking at the gastroenterology guidance from 2015, which I'm happy to send you the link to, the guidance was for long segment Barrett's to have a surveillance every 2 to 3 years, and for short segment every 5. And so I just wonder whether in times of resource shortage, it might be appropriate for the relevant departments to look at their surveillance and follow-up programs and move to the longest acceptable interval between tests rather than the shortest recommended interval to try and make better use of scarce resource.
Thanks, Adam. That's a really good point, because endoscopy is the area that we are most challenged on in terms of recovery, and that's my understanding is that the team are working on the plans as we speak, and when we get through that, that's certainly something that we'll factor in. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Meredith.
Thank you very much, Julian. Thanks for the report, Julie and Zena. Zena, I just had a query around the quality accounts. I'd be interested to know to what extent the providers' quality accounts were consistent with your own views of the quality of those organisations. I think it'd be extraordinary if they were in complete alignment. So any disparities that you felt were evident?
I think, Meredith, we did provide comments back to each of the providers with our kind of confidence level, if you like. I'm happy to share those separately. This information has been through QPC last month. I'm afraid I don't have anything prepared to speak to at the moment, Meredith, but I can certainly share that with you outside of the meeting.
I don't need the detail. I just wondered if, as a kind of a general view, you felt, nah, that's roughly in line, or whoa, why are you saying that?
Oh, right. So, I mean, generally they were in line. I think the approach taken nationally with regard to quality accounts has been more lightweight, if I can frame it in that way, this year because of COVID, and so many of the organisations nationally have put in a restricted or a reduced number of objectives for this year. They've all covered their objectives for last year and have made progress on those, and I think we would recognise the progress that has been made actually, but there were one or two where we did point out further areas for improvement.
Thank you very much.
Claire Parker, I'll just take Adam's.
Zena, can I just ask a question about serious incidents and what kind of progress is happening around the trust, particularly staff, around their theming, their trending, their learning, and how you see that going?
Yeah, so we've raised this at the quality review meeting and again at their internal maternity meeting yesterday. What I've asked for is assurance or line of sight of their approach to checking that incidents, the learning from incidents has been fully embraced and embedded, and they're not able to give that full assurance at the moment. With regard to maternity, they are doing a detailed piece of work looking back at a certain number of incidents to make sure that those lessons learned are fully embedded, and that is certainly part of our testing process when we do quality visits and review their quality audits and ask them for themed reviews. So my view really, Claire, is that this is still quite early days with the trust in terms of having assurance on their governance processes. What the trust have done is invested significantly in their central governance in order to manage this process, and they seem to be fully committed to doing that, and I encourage those approaches that they're taking.
What is frustrating about that, Zena, is I know it's not part of the niche report now, but initially when we 2 or 3 years ago when we conceived the idea of the niche report was to look at the SI process, how SIs were recognised within the hospital, how they were investigated, how learning was embedded, and how they were reported back to the board. And obviously that element of the niche report was pooled, wasn't it? And the niche focused on the second part of their report, looking at learning from deaths and seeing that. But clearly that's something that we've known about for many years, and it is frustrating that we're still hearing that staff haven't done that, given all the pressure that's been on them, quite rightly, around the Ogden report and some of those issues there. To find that there is this sort of still this structural breakdown and not embedding and learning that they can't. I'm sure they're doing it, but it's demonstrating to us that they're. Every day doctors and nurses are learning from their mistakes. I'm not doubting that's happening in SAF, but what I'm doubting is that it's then embedded and it's known about throughout the trust and the board level and fed back down into the system.
Yeah, so I guess to cover that off in two parts. First of all, there's the part about how they're handling and managing serious incidents now, and I do believe that they are following the NHS framework for that. We now sit on their weekly review of incidents where they receive them in, decide the level of investigation, allocate them out, and also receive the lessons learned. So I think their internal processes have certainly strengthened over the last 6 months, and to have the CCG as part of that meeting, I think demonstrates their approach to being more open and learning lessons. And we actively contribute to those discussions. We're not just there as an observer, and they do take on board the comments made. So that's one thing. I think through our CQR and other governance processes and meetings that we attend and participate in, they do bring themed reviews, they do extract learning, and they do make changes. Now that is a more recent thing that I have seen. I think where there is a lack of assurance, and they will say this themselves, I'm sure, is that they cannot confirm actions taken 2 or 3 years ago have been fully embedded. And I can't answer for that, because a lot of the personnel at the trust have changed over time. You know, we know they've got significant workforce challenges, and sometimes it's around the consistency of employees, isn't it, and leadership within the trust that allows an organisation to retain a memory, and I would say that has been lacking, certainly a few years ago.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to know it's improved. And one, just I know Don wants a question, so I've got a further question just to build on that, really, and that, you know, SAF have learned a lot and are changing, and that's really positive. And the fact they're very open and the CCG is involved in their processes is good. But do we follow the same approach with all our providers? Because I think we see the same. Potentially, we may see the same issue around SIs that are occurring in our other providers, and like MPFT, and where they, you know, aren't demonstrating that things are different in each of the cases. And have we got the same level of scrutiny on their SI processes that we have on SAF? And SAF have, you know, coped with a lot of external scrutiny, and we're one of many organisations that are looking at their SI process. But I was just wondering, are we as an organisation applying that to our other providers in equal way? Because I do worry that we might. There's a potential risk, I'm not saying we have done, that we've been focusing so much on SAF that we've potentially let the other bit not have as much attention. I know that's made Steve Trenchard raise his hand, so I'm sure he might want to say something about that. That. Yes, please. Steve.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want me to come in there, Zena?
If Zena wants to start, and then
yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say there is a significant focus on SAF, and that's right and proper. You know, there was an element when I came into post, I didn't know what I didn't know. I could see what was being presented, and I needed to go and find out. And actually, attending trust forums was a good way of doing that. So the CCG are also a member of their mortality review group, etc. So there is a significant focus on SAF, and that will continue for some time, because they are a trust with challenges and quality challenges. We know that. I think where we do a similar approach, but not such a kind of an overwhelming approach, is where there are issues identified with certain providers, and I know Steve will come in with the mental health side of things in a moment. So we look for themes and trends. We receive all of the SIs that come through, and we triangulate that with other information, and we do test out and check out where we feel that that's appropriate. And by and large, in many of our other providers, they have already identified same or similar issues and are already investigating, which is more reassuring that they're identifying the same issues that we believe are worthy of further consideration. But we certainly do put the challenge in, and you know, well, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. On the mental health space, the MPFT do an annual look back in terms of their suicide report, and we looked at that last month, in fact, and that's a very detailed report, which I'm very happy to circulate. It's over 50 pages long. It looks at national benchmarking as well as local regional benchmarking for completed suicides, but more importantly, the key lessons learned. It does show across the organisation where there are themes that arise, both at an individual serious incident level and also whether those are themed in terms of clusters. There's nothing too dissimilar to what you see nationally. If you were to look at the National Confidential Inquiry on the completed suicides, they say probably 10 years ago we didn't have enough risk assessments that have been done. What we've got now is risk assessments that are being completed, but the safety plans aren't detailed or consistently robustly shared with individuals or with pathways, and that's a piece of work that we're helping to support with, particularly around the safety planning aspect. I think the other thing is that where you've got serious incidents or near misses, there's important learning from those, and we've in the last few months had particular issues with young people who missed opportunities, end up in SAF, possibly go into tier 4 beds or back out, and we've done themed reviews with those. And in fact, we've used our colleagues externally in the system, NHS to do themed reviews and play those back into the system. So there are a number of ways in which we're trying to ensure that the quality of the services that we've got is of the best standard.
So presumably that's fed into the quality committee, the CCG quality committees. They're the place really for the MPFT's annual review look back really to be looked at and dealt rather than at board level. So I suppose it's the assurance that that's going, reassurance that is actually going to our quality committee and that it's cited by our quality committee.
Correct.
And likewise, the theme reviews around some of the children's cases you've just said, which are clearly traumatic and troublesome. You know, it is that they should be going to our quality committee. And I do worry sometimes. You see all these harms, you know, we see all these people that are again listed in the report about. There's the diabetic eye screening. There's the the long waits in ambulances. There's the 12-hour breaches, and yet we seem to be saying there's no real harm done from any of those. And obviously that is looked at by the quality committee, and quite rightly. But obviously, if we were seeing harm, assuming that would be coming back through this report from the quality committee and showing those things. But it is about questions about how we know as practicing clinicians that people are coming to harm from delayed treatment. But it turns out we may have a different definition of harm to our harms definition, clearly. But
well, the definition for harms is clearly set out in terms of cancer delays. There is a piece of work that's happening across the system to unify all of the providers' approaches to harms definition, but there are some national standards within that.
Yeah, so I meant more as a clinician with a patient in front of you. You might not have the harm definition in your mind. You might just think that care could have possibly been different, rather than I know we share the harms definitions. So we've got Mike and Donna who've got questions. I think Donna's been waiting quite a long time, so I probably ought to go to Donna really. So sorry about
that. That's not a problem. Thanks, Julian. It was a question for Julie actually, and it was a little bit on what was just touched on about A&E. And I note in the report, we obviously had a deteriorating position with poor performance against the over 1 hour waits and the 4 hour wait. But I did note in the report that it said that the February position that had been for the first week of February was there was some improvement, and I just wanted to understand the current position with regard to A&E and again the issue of harm.
Okay, it's really variable at the moment, Donna. I think it's fair to say. I think certainly last week things, we have seen that the numbers are definitely not as high. The volume, either walk-ins or ambulance attendances to the EDs, are not as high as they were for the same period last year. It's the variability that seems to affect that. So again, yesterday there seemed to be concerns again. I gather there were, that we had a couple more 12-hour breaches yesterday and ambulance handover issues. The one area that the trust is completely focused on at the moment that I would hope would have a significant impact on this is and remains discharge earlier in the day. They have got an expert in to support them on that, and they've now driving an internal discharge dashboard, and there's clearly a lot of focus to get those discharges earlier in the day, to get that capacity to allow that flow through ED, to absolutely cut down on those you know, to remove the 12-hour breaches, and also then enable faster offloads from ambulances. So I think that remains to be the key issue. I think the other challenge they have faced during COVID is obviously managing the sort of 3 pathways. That has given them some issues in terms of the positive, negatives and queries. And I would hope that as we move forward, and the IPC oversight may evolve in time, that would help. But really, it isn't a volume issue in terms of overall, but it's variability. If they get, you know, for example, that we know that their physical infrastructure doesn't allow them to offload successfully, you know, more than sort of 5 or 6 ambulances in an hour, and sometimes they will get up to 9, 10 ambulances, and that's a physical infrastructure challenge that they are looking at. But again, I think that forms part of this, the improvement plan that I understand we will have a draft of by the end of this month, and that will ultimately go report up through the urgent and emergency care delivery group and board to really drive that performance up to we know because of workforce challenges we can't get up to the 95%, but we should be aiming for the 85%, and that's been acknowledged by NHS EI.
Julie, where's our 62% A&E attendance? Is that within the pack of the West Midlands? You know, obviously everyone's.
No, we're at the lower end. We're not being quite at the bottom. There've been 2 or 3 below us, but we've definitely been in the bottom portion.
Thank you. Mike, you've been waiting patiently. Hopefully now with microphone.
Can you hear me now? Oh, that's great. I had to start again. So I've had a wonderful time. Thank you for interesting comments. Mike, I'm slightly conflicted here because part of this is as a provider and not. But one of my concern about the serious incidents is, as I've put in the chat, how does this feed down to the people at ground level? It's all right having a meeting somewhere, but if it doesn't get passed on to anyone, then I think there are still cause for issues. Secondly, especially with the maternity service, because general practice now doesn't deal with antenatal care, we struggle sometimes, especially when they start changing what they've been told to do or they are then passing it on to us when we don't know why it suddenly changed. Third thing is directed more to Steve, I think, is in some respects suicides are a point too late. We should we not be doing the people that have attempted suicide and been stopped, and what happens with them? I mean, I'm sure it does feed in, unfortunately, that some people will go on to succeed. But I reiterate something I've already stated before, is that we as a practice, and this is where I am slightly conflicted, wrote asking about some near misses to the MPFT, and we still have not had any feedback directly to us about the person who had to be talked down from jumping off a cliff. We wrote that and we still haven't had a formal answer back. And I think in some respects, it's all right doing suicides, but it's a bit too late. We should be looking at the people before you get that, making sure that there are pathways properly put in and not just send. You know, unfortunately, the advice that seems to be more common is go back to see your GP, which I don't think is appropriate. So I'm sorry I'm wittering on a bit, but I thought I might as well talk while I've got a chance. My computer lets me talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Zena, did you want to come back about that? Is that what your hands up about?
Well, a couple of bits actually. So how does this feed down to staff at ground level? Do you mean the learning from incidents, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah.
And changing policy because of it, because it's no good if it's just at a meeting and doesn't get shared.
Well, it does, and the RALIG process signs off the action plans, and the CCG have final sign-off of the action plans, which includes feedback to the individuals concerned and the teams affected, and takes account of the wider impact to an organisation. So I think that is covered. The question then is about why do we see that that's not sticking? and some of that is human factors, some of that is their temporary workforce. Even with all of the checks and balances in place, you know, why do people walk on the grass when there's a do not walk on the grass sign? Because they think there's no consequence, or they don't read the sign. You know, there are still some human factors in all of this, but you know, our approach is to always provide a set of circumstances that guides people to act and behave in the right way. And I think their governance approaches and their audits that they're doing internally are picking that up and are addressing it. So that was one thing. You talked about maternity, Mike, and I hear what you're saying. Really, we've had some recent discussions about pharmacology and medicines management around maternity care, and there is a separate group taking that forward. And in fact, Priya is part of that group with our medicines management team and others. There's a whole suite of prescribing points that we need to cover. So that should address some of the matters that you've alluded to. And then the third point around suicides, I think it's about getting further upstream, isn't it? And identifying potential for harm and for individuals rather than matters taking a course of events. We are discussing with the trust their crisis response times, their access to services. That's a continual dialogue through all of the serious incidents we have, and we're gaining assurances around their access times and their approach and how they're risk assessing on a continual basis. And that is a continual discussion that we are having with the trust and is managed through the CQR process. Meeting with them, so that is all considered, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve, for that comment. Zero ambition, I think, is more appropriate, but there we go. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just add one more point. So I do apologise. There's an error on page 52 of my report, and it's my error, and it is item 2.1, and it's the second bullet point down where there was a never event identified, and it says there are no immediate learning points identified. In fact, there was an immediate learning point, and my apologies for not correcting that before the report came through.
Yeah, there was one other, before we moved on and noted the report, there were two other things. One was just another correction about the report that just needs changing, is in section 2.3, a paragraph seems to have slipped in about check under the NPFT, whereas I think that reinforces a comment in section that should be in 2.9 rather than 2.3. We can't hold NPFT to account for checks performance, and I don't think. So that just needs moving to another paragraph. And the other one, before we just made the content, was perhaps go back to Julie very briefly and just use this opportunity to remind the public about, obviously with the long waits, about the advice for what to do if they think things have changed following a referral, following an appointment in hospital, about their condition.
If they have and have got they've obviously been seen in an outpatient and they've got a follow-on treatment, then absolutely they should contact the hospital directly. In terms of outpatient referrals at the moment, that's what we're still working through because of the volume of that and the clinical time to review that. Again, my first port would be to contact the hospital, but we are working through that, and it's a piece of work that Sam and I've been trying to push through. With the system, but that is having some challenges at the moment to get that through because it's the volume that we need to sort out. So it is there. It has been discussed with Gold. I don't have a solution at the moment, but we are desperately working on one, Julian.
Yeah. No, in the meantime, I told them in the pre-meeting that really, probably, if you've not been seen, probably maybe it's best to go back to your GP. Yeah. And if you have been seen and you're waiting things to deteriorate, to go back to the hospital. As I say, we need a more consistent or a better precise solution. Meredith, you want to come in at the end?
Really sorry, Julian. I don't think we've heard Steve's answer to Mike's question around never events and so forth.
I assume that was covered by Zena's, but we can, if Steve's got anything to add to Zena's answer to Mike.
I think I put in the chat that there is a wider suicide prevention group that the CCG is part of that has a zero ambition that's chaired by public health and has all partners in there, including the community and voluntary sector. I think, you know, I fully accept that suicide is too late. It's what you do before that, which is why there is that focus on further upstream work. More importantly, there's been investment in this from the national teams, and particularly where often suicide happens in families and is cross-generational. So there's key work that can be done in a post-vention intervention, and we've invested in that space to support people who are impacted by where suicide happens in families. The point I'll pick up, Mike, it's not appropriate that you don't get responses to issues, so we'll pick that up with MPFT and ensure that that response comes back to you on that particular case. I think we've also put through the quality committee the survey around mental health, because clearly there's some issues from a perception of the quality of our mental health services recently from the work that Prior George has done. So we will in time bring a response back to that work, and risk assessment and confidence in the offer is part of that feedback which we need to build. I'll put in a chat as well that part of the investment that's coming through on redesigning community services, members of this government body will remember that the MPFT changed its pathways to specialist pathways and moved away from communities, predominantly from the old CMHT model. There's now a nationally mandated model that is insisting that there is a greater visibility and there is a realignment of mental health workforce around GPs and PCNs, and that's work in progress that will be progressing over the next couple of years.
Thank you. So can I just remind everyone not to put things in the chat really, because it's just hard for the public to pick them up and half of them to be minuted. So I think any contributions to the meeting, you know, would be brilliant if everyone could actually vocalise them. So thank you for Meredith for flagging that. And the survey you talked about was the GP survey around mental health services, and it's obviously important that goes through the right processes before it's brought back to the board. So thank you for that. So we're asked to make the content of the performance and quality report. So thank you very much, Zena and Julie. Julie can't quite go away just yet because your next paper is the update on the breast cancer services.
Thank you, Julian. Obviously, assume everyone's read the paper. As I did say in the main performance report, I am able to update the governing body that the situation has continued to improve, with current booking being at day 17, and we're confident that we can get to day 14. We're told by the trust by the end of the month. However, as the paper does say, we are very tight in terms of demand and capacity, and therefore there will be a paper going to our Joint Strategic Commissioning Committee next week around further actions that can help to get that demand and capacity to a more sustainable position, not least because there'll be considerable recovery to do from the breast screening programme as well that we will need to work our way through over coming months. Happy to take any questions.
So just for clarity, is the referral down now to 17 days for both symptomatic and not and cancer referrals? Yeah. Yeah. I think Keith was first with his hand up. Mr. First, Keith, and then Adam.
Thanks, Julian. Julia, at the quality meeting recently, we discussed the fact that South is an outlier in not changing the way people who are dealt with who are referred, so that the more serious life-threatening cases are given a priority. Yeah. Is that part of that JSCC paper?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the actions that we're bringing to, because obviously we need everyone's support for them to change that, and that will be part of that action plan brought next week.
That's great, thank you.
Adam.
I was really making the same point. It's quite, there's the constitutional thing of cancers getting 2-week wait, and then there's the non-constitutional thing of everybody else getting 2-week wait for no particular good reason, even when we're not worried about them. And it's absolutely insane that in a time of delay, the people with an obvious or significant concern of malignancy haven't been given priority over somebody who's 27 and has seen me 7 times about their cyclical mastalgia and about whom I have no concern at all. And why am I, as a GP, filling in forms giving them information if they're going to do nothing useful with it? I might as well just say this person has a breast, please see. So I'm quite unhappy.
I think you're right. I think the whole point around the prioritisation of that, I think, is something we have to consider in terms of lessons learned and why we didn't take locally the same decisions that other areas did. I think the important bit for now is that the team worked really hard. The estates work has been done. The capacity's there, but as I said, the capacity is only back to what it was previously. I think there's still to really make that sustainable. We know demand for all cancer pathways is only going to increase, so we do need to do the work, and I think part of that will be to look at that, how we prioritise across that breast symptomatic and the breast cancer pathway. I think it's entirely part of that.
Julie, if capacity is not above pre-COVID levels, and we're clawing back the waiting times, and presumably referrals are lower than the pre-COVID levels.
They're doing extra lists, Julian, which is why it's a question of sustainability. The team are working really hard, but it's not sustainable. They could do that to get us down, and that's what they're absolutely doing. My concern, and this is why we need to take the paper through JSCC, is we just need a little bit more resilience for this, because as we know, there's continued pressure around earlier diagnosis and encouraging patients to come forward. We need to make sure that we've got that contingency within our core capacity, rather than being constantly dependent on waiting list initiatives, which is not really sustainable for staff in the long term.
No, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Obviously, it is brilliant that there's been an improvement, and it is good that there's a plan to get that back down to 14 days. I think Matty's got a question as well. Sorry, Mike's got his hand up. Yeah,
thank you. Sorry, this is not directly directed towards breast, but it is about 14-day rules. Before COVID, Gail, myself, and one of the paediatricians was trying to sort out 14-day rule referrals for paediatrics.
Okay.
Which I did mention when I moved up to board member about this had not been completed. There are still issues with regards 14-day rule referrals for children, and nothing seems to have happened. I was quite involved in it, and I'm sure I think David Cowley was the other person that was involved. I'm still quite happy to try and work on that, because I think there is a big hole there which really does need plugging, irrespective, and that's got nothing to do with COVID. It is the whole situation of of how people deal with children and malignancies.
Okay,
I'm still happy to be involved, but I think if we are trying to move forward, it's something which has been delayed, which was uncompleted a year ago, and I think still needs to be finished. So I'm quite happy to talk to you at another date if that's appropriate. But I do
pick that up and make sure that gets picked up through the cancer group. So thanks for that, Mike. I'll be in touch.
And we probably should move that into the previous paper, because this probably it's slightly off topic on this paper, which is about breast cancer, but it is incredibly valid to.
Sorry, I didn't know which when to put my hand up about it. So
that's right, it's not a problem. I think if Sandra can move that into the other bit just for the minutes, because it'll just tie it in better. I think I know it's slightly unusual to do that, but it is slightly off topic, and we don't want to lose the focus on this breast cancer, which was a particular paper that was brought back. So any other questions about this or anything else for Julie? If not, it's quite complicated what we're asked to note, so I'm not going to read it all out, but the paper details sort of 5 things we're asked to note, 1 thing to receive assurance on, and 1 to receive limited assurance on. So if everyone's happy that we do note those actions that are in the paper and to receive the assurances that's given on those two points. Thank you. Thank you. And then if we can move on to the next paper, which is a maternity service update from Zena.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So again, speaking to the executive summary with a lot of backing information in the main report. Just following on from our last board meeting, and the Ockenden first report into care at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital had been published, and that made some national recommendations. So the Trust have submitted the required information return back to NHS NHS-EI, and the LMNS has had sight of that. In fact, they've made 2 returns now, and the LMNS has commented on both of those returns. We expect there will be further requirements for updates to NHS-E&I in due course, and the LMNS will take account of receiving those reports when they're due. On top of that, we were asked to provide a return on the responsibilities of the LMNS to look at the compliance against Principle 2, and that was to provide information on the quality oversight in light of the Ockenden report and also the ICS requirements, and that work, that submission has been made. We're awaiting a further meeting with NHS-EI from the region to further discuss those submissions to get feedback on them. We are reviewing the quality governance arrangements, and there are proposals, and those need to now be put into place. They do dovetail with the ICS arrangements, and we have had to wait a little while to get the ICS overall governance for their shadow board for the next sort of 12 months or so in place, and we're working towards the terms of reference, so that can now cascade and roll out. The report provides information on exceptions and escalations, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there is some information there. But to say that where there are exceptions, we do investigate those and seek further assurance and information. And to note that the Trust's methods of audit are very much based in a manual count and records checking, which is a very inefficient and outmoded way of conducting audits, and it limits their ability to provide good evidence and good assurance that all is in order because of the time constraints of those processes. They are seeking to implement a system called Badgernet, which is an electronic maternity record that is due to be implemented probably by May, June now. There has been a slight delay because of the Trust's internal IT programme being somewhat delayed because of COVID. To flag, the CNST data submission period is extended by 3 months, and so this does pose a challenge for the Trust because that now requires 3 additional months of manual audits, and it is quite a burden to do that. So there is a risk that they won't have completed all of that, but they are trying their very best to do that, and the CCG will undertake a quality assurance process of quite a proportion of that information. They are making progress with their Saving Babies' Lives care bundle, and there was an external review by the MatNeo network that confirmed that progress was being made, and that return that the Trust made, which was a self-assessment, appeared to be an accurate reflection of the actual position at the Trust. The network are confident the Trust will make more progress in this latter period. A number of points being was the sign-off of policies that were outside of NICE guidance, and that refers back to the Ockenden recommendation that all policies should be within NICE guidance, and we had quite a long debate with the Trust about this yesterday. So the process for signing off any policies that are not in line with NICE guidance is that they go to the Maternity Neonatal Clinical Network, who reviews them, who then gives an endorsement about the suitability of the policy because it's at variance, and that endorsement needs to be approved by the CCGs. So there are a couple of policies which in fact go over and above NICE guidance, and for that reason they are seen as a suitable and safe alternative, and in fact give an enhanced level of assurance around attention to women. And so those policies have been adopted with CCG approval, and at the meeting yesterday the UHB obstetrician clinical lead was in attendance, and he also confirmed that was the right and proper interpretation of that requirement. Moving on, continuity of carer teams are a key part of improving perinatal mortality and safety over time, and it's a national ambition through the transformation programme. The Trust has 2 teams in place and are seeking to have 7, but that requires recruitment to not only to vacancy but also to their new staffing plan around Birth Rate Plus, which is the maternity workforce assessment tool. And I don't think the money's the problem. It really is recruiting staff to allow those plans to progress, and it's a national picture and indeed a regional picture. I would say they're probably in the middle of the pack in terms of their progress with that, and they are fully committed to rolling that out as soon as is practical, and are following the national mandate to target certain groups first. The Embrace report information is also attached. That details that the Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin as a system are rated red for stillbirths, neonatal deaths and extended perinatal mortality. And this is for 2018 data, but at organisational level, SATH is rated amber, and I've also included University Hospitals North Midlands because they are our neonatal pathway and they're rated red for the same metric, and that is after moderated, adjusted data. So there are improvement works for both of those trusts in association with that. And the improvement work is really around the saving babies' lives, the continuity of care and all of the maternity transformation work. I've included some patient experience information which gives some positive assurance around services. And then second bullet point to last, you'll be aware of the transforming midwifery care proposal, and we've discussed it here at board previously, that the proposals for consultation need national approval, and that approval is not yet forthcoming. However, we have had correspondence from NHS to ask that we look again at the proposals in light of the Ockenden report to confirm that those are still the right and proper and valid proposals. And of course, we will be doing that in light of the inequalities agenda, which has taken more prominence over the last 12 months. And there will be a report going to the end of April LMNS programme board, giving a synopsis of where we feel that those proposals meet or need to be varied from the work already done, and we're hopeful there will be some movement on approvals to undertake some of the changes. What I will say in the meantime, since the proposals were shared with NHSEI, of course, we've had a significant change in services. Some of our service models are different, and some of our services have ceased on safety grounds, and so therefore we need to look at the proposed consultation options in light of the changes that have made in the meantime. So just to summarise, there are no particular areas of escalation. I've mentioned a few areas that we are progressing and pursuing, and it just to continue to flag that the data quality is still not fully reliable because of the manual counts and the sort of manual handling of the data at the moment. But with the new electronic dashboard, that will help, and with Badgernet, that will significantly help our audit reliance.
Thank you, Zena. Keith.
Thanks, Julian. I just wanted to say that as the outgoing chair of the LMNS programme board, I agree with your comments in the paper, Zena, about SAT's often slow response, which hasn't helped for a number of years, but also to hark back to comments that Dave Evans made at the January meeting here, where he was concerned about the need for more pace, particularly with the continuity of care. I understand all the issues that you've just outlined in your summary, but I think it's a long-running problem that SAT seems to be very slow about getting change, and given the current state and the need to respond quickly to issues raised in the Ockenden report, I think that's going to be a real priority for the LMNS going forward, but also for the CCG to keep on top of SAT to make sure that they are doing the maximum possible to escalate their response to all these issues.
Yeah, and on their staffing position, Keith, they are looking at the staffing position and raising a risk around their vacancy, and particularly around Band 6 midwifery. And those are key roles. They're experienced midwives that often lead these teams. So they are cognizant of the need to put in continuity of carer. It is largely workforce dependent. And as I say, that's being raised internally through their risk register management process.
Thanks.
John.
Yeah, thank you, Zena. Just 3 parts to my questions, or 3 questions. The first being the data quality side of things and Badgernet maternity record. If you could just give us a little bit more detail on the improvements that we'll see once the Badgernet maternity record is going. What we expect to see improve there. And then secondly, just a point of clarification in section 6, the maternity quality operational committee, the comment about the one neonatal death review where the alongside unit was felt to be a significant safety feature. I just wanted to check that that was intended to read that it was an improvement rather than a risk. But finally, and most pertinently really, my question is around section 7, which is the service user feedback section. And I think we recognise how vital it is that we have a system that responds to concerns raised by individual patients when things do not go right. And I was looking at the Maternity Voices Partnership and see that that is one of the forums where patients can raise concerns. And I was really wanting to know how active that is. It looks very useful. I went onto the website to get some details. The last newsletter seemed to be summer 2018. So it was a question really, is that being used? Is it being promoted? How do people feed into it?
Yeah, so in order then, so Badgernet, and I think the report would show with the induction of labour section of the report, where induction of labour is recorded currently through hard records. There are a number of fields that can be completed, whereas with Badgernet there will be one field and it will require mandated data entry, so there'll be a consistent and a standardisation, and that's the same in very many metrics, John, that at the moment some of their audits are down to interpretation of the records rather than the records leading you to be able to measure things clearly and in categories. So that would be an example of that. To confirm, yes, the alongside unit is in place, and that is a positive move, because that the incident in question, the baby was delivered in the maternity midwife-led unit, and that at the time was located at the opposite end of the corridor or hospital to the consultant unit, and therefore the transfer of neonates is always a risky business, and there were some issues with that. And then finally, the Maternity Voices Partnership, we have a really active group. I will look again at the website then, thank you for prompting me on that one, but they are fully embedded into co-producing maternity handheld records, those sort of things, policy development, and through the comments that have come back through Ockendom, I'm re-looking again at how the MVP are fully part of our quality assurance processes within the system, and seeking to for them to have an equal place around the table as Healthwatch do at certain forums, and Lynn, I know, will endorse this when I've done the consultation on the quality strategy. MVP have been part of that discussion with Healthwatch, putting in service user perspectives. So they are definitely a voice, and we do fund them through the LMNS as well. Right,
thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you, Zena.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. A few points. I'm saddened that we're still in the red in our outcome data in 2018. I thought our figures were improving, but I presume the rest of the country is improving more. And I don't think we, and by extension our public, can be assured of quality until we get out of that poor performance. The delay in implementing the maternity changes is presumably contributing to that. And I was going to ask if, given COVID, whether we're going to be able to proceed without the normal public consultation first, but I can hear that's a work in progress. I'm really concerned about the caesarean section rates. Below expected elective rates and high emergency rates would suggest that women are having inappropriate trials of labour and either delivering dangerously or ending up with an emergency section more dangerously. And that surely must be contributing to our poor outcomes. And I would ask, have those rates changed? Can we have a more recent audit that shows those rates have moved towards normal? And if they haven't changed, can we put some pressure onto the trust to look at why they haven't changed and what's going on? Could they do a retrospective audit of their emergency sections and see if there are groups of patients going to delivery who shouldn't be going to delivery? I mean, it's an area that suggests that current appropriate standards of care are not being delivered in an area where we know we're performing badly, and it worries me a lot.
Yeah, so the C-section element is a number of components, and I know as a clinician you'll understand this, that a large part of elective C-section is a discussion that's had obviously with the expectant mother, and so maternal choice is a factor, so we have to respect that. So the elective C-section rate, it is what it is, and we do commission in accordance with NICE guidance. We're not at variance with that, so that's one thing to say. The high emergency rate, there's month-to-month variation, Adam, and small numbers can make a big difference in terms of percentages. I know you'll understand that. I think where we seek to kind of triangulate information is looking at birth outcomes, and we're seeing more positive indicators around birth trauma, both for the woman and for the baby, and also brain injuries, etc., which can take a little bit longer to manifest. So we do look at all of those indicators. We are asking the trust to do a little bit more work on C-section, so I'm hopeful I'll be able to bring something back to a future meeting, but certainly it would go through QPC first.
And just on that paragraph Adam's talking about, should that middle 25% actually be 15? Because obviously the overall target's 25, of which emergencies are 10, but then we say elective should be 25. So that middle one should be 15, should it, for the target for elective caesarean? So electives would be 15 and emergencies would be 10. We're currently 13 and 12.
Okay, let me just read that again. So the C-section rate is around about the national expected rate overall. So the emergency C-section rate is around 12%, which is higher than the local target. Sorry, what's the query?
The bit where it says overall the rate is 26%, 27%, which is close to the overall target rate of 25. And then we're saying that the emergency section rate is 12% above 10. But we're saying that the elective one is 13, but the target's 25. Surely that target there should be 15, so it adds up then to 25 totally, right?
I think that they're different. They are different data sets. I'll have a look again, Julian, just to clarify. But they're different data sets, and it's not an aggregation, because the overall rate would not be just those two sections. No, those two categories. I do apologise. I'll look again at it, Julian, and provide some clarity.
Yeah, no, thank you. Unless there's any other comments. Adam, has your hand gone back up? Sorry.
I was just going to say a little bit more. Yes, patient choice matters, but patient choice is made on the basis of the information that the patients are given. And I don't see why our patients would be making a different decision from patients in the rest of the country unless they were being given different information or slightly different direction by their clinicians. And we have a history of aiming for a low section rate with poor outcomes over many years. And so continuing to have a below predicted elective caesarean rate worries me that the changes that we need to see following the multiple reports over many years haven't percolated fully through the system. That would be my worry. And yes, small numbers matter, but we're looking at annualized data here for 2018, so they're not that small. And the deviation from the elective section rate looks quite big to me. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to say any more. I've made my piece.
Well, I mean, just to respond to an helpful discussion. Thank you, Adam. And I think perhaps members might recall other discussions at this meeting in the past where the C-section rate has been questioned about are we overdoing elective C-sections? You know, are we allowing more? Are we acting in the right way? Is it the right thing to do? We shouldn't be paying for C-sections has been the gist of the discussion. So this seems to be the counter argument, doesn't it, Adam?
I'm not sure I can remember that discussion in the recent board, Zena. So maybe in other subcommittees, but I can't remember us having a board discussion where we said that. And certainly the Optum report would report, as Adam was saying, about the drive for normal, deliveries without intervention as being part of the contributing factors to some of those issues raised within the Optum report. So I'm not sure I do agree that we've had a discussion here where we've said that we need to be pushing. In fact, I disagree completely. We've had a discussion here that says we've been suggesting we should push elective rates down, but it may be that that's been at other forums and other committees where we have previously had a PLCV around elective cesarean requests, which clearly, possibly we should be facilitating those sort of discussions rather than sort of preventing them, which is what's come out of the Optum report from my reading. I've got Keith that's come in, and I'm not sure whether Adam is still up from before or whether it's from past. So Keith, certainly a new comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce that, June. I don't remember us ever saying that we needed to keep the C-section rate down. I think we have had discussions where we've said there needs to be a balanced approach and it needs to take women's views into account. But I really don't remember at governing body or quality committee or anywhere that we've had a discussion where we've been trying to push for C rates to go down.
Okay, I mean, I think it was in association with the procedures of limited clinical value. I think you're right, Julian. It was in association with that discussion, and we reviewed our policy on the basis of that. And in fact, SAF asked us to make sure that our policy reflected that they do adhere to NICE guidance and that we do commission to NICE guidance. So that was the point. I can check back and see where those discussions were held, but I know we have had discussions about POLC-V and C-section rates.
And we've also, I have flagged the presence of the PLCV on cesarean section and said that it was due for review, and I thought that was the feedback I had, that it was due for review. So I don't think I've seen any recent discussions around the PLCV on cesarean, that really, when it was developed with huge input from the hospital, and that possibly at the time was to drive down maternal requests. But certainly, on the basis of the Optum report and the changing process, that clearly isn't appropriate. It needs to be in line with the NICE guidance, which I'm kind of reassured that it is now. Liz, you've got your hand up. Sorry, I missed you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add my weight to Keith's comments in terms of the disappointment in terms of progress with the continuity of care project, because in a sense that is really trying to tackle those inequalities agenda that we wanted to progress, and the new transformation community services that we can't yet go out for public consultation was trying to do that. So I am disappointed of the lack of progress with it with regard to that, and those numbers do not seem to be at the level that we should be aiming for at this stage.
And my comment on that would be, do we need to see the figures about the number of people who are offered being booked onto the continuity of care pathway and the number of people who accept it? Because obviously that figure of 4% for deprivation, is where our I know they've only got 2 teams out of 7, you're saying, but where are they targeting those 2 teams? Because we know where the deprivation is, within our system. So surely those teams need to be in that area actively promoting it. I suppose the question is, those figures for themselves don't show us, because it might be that everyone's been offered it and that's the percentage uptake. And again, it's how we're persuading people and how we're selling that service, I suppose, is the question. Or it could be the fact that we're actually not offering it to the right group of people. We're offering it to the people who've got less deprivation rather than offering it to the people who've got more deprivation. So those figures are difficult to interpret.
So the continuity of carer teams are operating in the areas of priority within the county. There is detail that comes to the LMNS board, and we'll seek to pursue those questions through that forum and bring an update to this board as well.
Yeah, because that's more worrying if they are in some respects, because obviously if they are actually in those deprived areas, if they're offering it, how come then?
It's not a universal offer though, Julian. There are teams within those areas, but it's not a universal offer for every woman in those areas. And then we have to, sorry.
There you go, sorry.
And then you know, there's a choice of uptake clearly, but also even with 100% offer, you won't get 100% of that playing out into the reality of delivering continuity of care for a variety of reasons.
No, the continuity of care is a huge challenge, and it is something that, you know, is a big question about how you can deliver continuity of care across such a rural system with these different delivery options. So John.
Well, yes, thanks. It was just say, can we do a piece of work to look at that in more detail? It seems very pertinent, really.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zena.
So that piece of work will come to the LMNS though, won't it? And then feed back into this rather than coming back to the board. Is that right, Zena?
That would be my expectation, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We do need to move on. So we're asked to note the contents of the report and the progress being made and note the areas of concern and actions being taken to address. So thank you very much. A little bit behind schedule, we move on to Claire Skidmore with the Shropshire and Telford CCG's finance and contracting report.
Thanks, Julian. So the report here today is our month 10 finance position, and as I've described in previous meetings, we've had a very different finance regime and arrangements for this financial year. So our month 1 to 6 position was forced to a break-even position through non-recurrent allocation from NHS EI, and then our planning really has been around month 7 onwards to the end of the financial year. So you'll recall previously that we've talked about a planning requirement for CCGs generally to break even, and the fact that for both of our CCGs we weren't able to do that at the point in late summer and into the autumn when we were setting our plans. So we were issued with a budget allocation that actually represented a £15 million deficit between the two CCGs, albeit that wasn't an agreed position for us, and obviously we've been working hard to try to come closer to that break-even position. I think it's fair to say that when we set that plan, we took a very prudent view. It's been really hard this year, not just for this CCG, but for all organisations really to set our forecasts, because we're in a new world at the moment, and historic activity is not always the best indicator of what's going to happen in the here and now and the immediate future. So what we've been doing over the last few months when we've been reviewing our forecasts is just being a little bit cautious really in terms of what that number looks like. However, the good news is that in month 10, we have been able to bring that forecast position down a little more compared to what we'd reported to governing body previously. That's been with a lot of work in the background to really test those figures and to make sure that we're confident that they're not going to bounce back and cause us a greater financial problem at the end of the year. But the result of all that work is that at month 10, we have been able to bring our forecast deficit down a little more. And so we're at the moment, notwithstanding the additional budget for the 15 million for a moment, if you look at our crude report and compare our forecast to that break-even position, between the two CCGs, we're about £5 million above that break-even, so a deficit of about 3 million for Shropshire and 2 for Telford. I think I've mentioned previously as well that our quick plans for this year obviously have not been happening in the same way we would have planned, but credit to the teams, particularly in prescribing and CHC, where we still have managed to deliver some savings in year. So there's just under £7 million worth of savings in that position as well. We're still assessing the forecast at the moment. I've had some interim support in, particularly supporting us with CHC. That's one of our most biggest areas of concern, really, in terms of the impact of the COVID situation and what that means both for the current position and our underlying moving forward. And there's some more progress with that deep dive that's informed some of our month 11 work that's happening at the moment. But certainly at this point, the forecast that we present here for the month 10 position, I'm content that that is a strong reflection of where we think we will land. I'm certainly not anticipating it to worsen over the last few weeks of the financial year. And certainly you'll see in the position as well, we have been able to bring down our risk assessment of the numbers because of that confidence that we're gaining now in terms of being closer to year end. I'll pause there. I'm happy to take any comments or questions from people on the in-year.
Keith.
One of the big concerns from the Finance Committee over recent months has been about the underlying position, which, given the issues you're outlining, it's not been able to be addressed in the normal way during this year. But the position has deteriorated, is now very poor, and it's currently running to over £71 million. And I think the governing body just needs to be aware of the scale of that underlying position, which I think does give you a pause for thought when you look at the improvement in break-even position for this year. It makes you feel a bit better than actually I think you should feel. I think we should feel extremely nervous about the CCG's extremely difficult underlying position.
Meredith. You're on mute, Meredith. Are you not on mute?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Claire. Just a couple of points, if I may. I noticed there was £1.7 million relating to individual commissioning. It wasn't clear. Maybe you've explained it and I didn't understand it. It wasn't clear what that related to, and indeed whether or not it's just a deferring of cost that's going to come through when arrangements get more back to normal. And then the second point, and you may think, oh, for goodness sake, Meredith, what are you talking about? Well, there was a 0.5 million financial improvement as a result of slowness getting neurology services going. I just didn't like the word improvement. That kind of suggests that we'll have a significantly financially improved position if it weren't for those annoying patients. It jarred with me, Claire.
Okay, thank you. Point taken. Yeah, I think the choice of language we can refine in terms of presentation for future months. Yes, what we've seen is that we plan to make some expenditure in neurology, but there's been a slippage in the start date, so we haven't needed to. So yes, from a very broad point of view, that's an improvement in the total number. But you're absolutely right, that isn't related to any comments on patients or services, but it may be construed that way if we're not careful. We'll reflect on that.
I suppose my point, Claire, is that implicitly it is commenting on patients, because there are patients who aren't getting services that they need because of that delay. Yeah,
that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Claire, did we resolve the issue around the primary care allocation, where we'd been given an allocation from NHS England of 2.5 million that we'd then allocated, that then they'd told us actually wasn't 2.5, it was 1.4, and they got their sums wrong? Have we resolved that? Because that was previously mentioned in the reports, and I had thought it was mentioned in this report, but I can't quite see it now.
It's still a live discussion with NHS England, so we're still carrying the full extent of the expenditure in this position, but we're still having conversations with NHSEI about whether there's any potential for additional funding against that.
It might be £1 million better off again, because if they stick to their original calculations.
Yeah. Can I just come back to Meredith's first question as well, please? So he asked about the individual commissioning improvement and the 1.7 million. So the piece of work that we asked an independent accountant to come and have a look at really was to have a look at our forecasting methodology and see if we were being over prudent in some of our assessments, and particularly what we were looking at was our view of activity and how the numbers of patients and how that might change over the course of the year, and also the average prices that we were using for that forecasting. And so based on his review and our subsequent relook at some of the information that we'd got, plus based on the work that the CHC team have been doing themselves to update Broadcare, and again we've got, compared to the previous month, we've got another month's worth of data in terms of the patients that are recorded on there, we were able to change those assessments and those estimates basically of spend in a way that we were comfortable wouldn't be stripping that back too much in terms of what might come through. Does that answer the question, Meredith?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Claire.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Did you move on to the next bit, or was there a bit more, Claire? Was that
That's me for that paper. I'm happy to move on if we've got no other questions.
No, sorry, I thought we were going to do a bit more about that's the next paper, isn't it? The planning for 2022. That's the next paper. That's fine. So we're asked to just note the information contained in the financial report and also the good progress. And I think it is good to be ending, under our forecast. It's one of the, that's still a deficit, and as Meredith pointed out, part of that is because we're not providing a service to patients, but it is definitely an improvement. So that is good. So thank you for that. So we then move on to the next paper, which is the plan update for 21-22.
Thank you. And Keith's comments were quite a neat link into some of the background I was going to give to this one. So yeah, I keep saying this, and I think I will continue to. It's been such a strange year for financial planning. I don't think ever in my career I've been at this point in the financial year and I've not been able to present some sort of financial plan to a board. But there's a reality of where we're at in terms of national planning guidance being delayed, and for good reason, but also a practical aspect to that in terms of our team need to be given a mandate to keep operating. So we can't pause all of our expenditure on the 1st of April because we haven't been given an allocation and we haven't signed off a full finance plan for the year. So I think the context for me is as Keith has described, we have a particularly challenging position. We have seen a deterioration in our underlying position moving forward into the new financial year. We are deep in the thick of conversations at a system level about how we do things differently next year and beyond. And specifically, you'll have heard me talk about the new financial framework that we're developing and the principles that we're going to operate under in terms of we can only allocate out what money we get in. We can't just keep playing past the deficit. So as part of that, we've been doing a lot of work on our cost base. And as a CCG, we're developing our model and refining that so that we've got a really clear view of how our costs will behave into the new year. And that's then to help us and support us in the system work we'll be doing that will look at a longer term financial plan that aims to stabilise that runaway underlying position in the first year and then starts to address that deficit position in future years. So in the absence of an allocation and planning guidance, I took a paper to Finance Committee recently to enable us to discuss this conundrum that I've got. So on a very broad level, we've drafted some figures based on what we know about our cost base and some assumptions around the income that we may get in, on the basis that if nothing else, I'm requesting today that governing body support our management team really in terms of a Q1 operating budget that may only be live for a short period if we receive our planning guidance and we're able to sign off a plan, but I think is absolutely important so that I have board oversight of what our position looks like, but also that mandate to allow the management team to spend. I think the only final comment I'll make, and then I'm happy to take questions, is that please don't think that this is a license for managers to go away and do anything that they want to do. All of our principles around financial governance and grip and control absolutely still stand. We are not looking to make new investments. This is purely about spending within the means that we already have and making decisions within that reasonable portfolio whilst we wait for that guidance to follow through for us. Keith, I'm sure you'd like to add to that.
Surprisingly, yes. Just like to confirm that the Finance Committee does support the approach that's being taken. It seems the only safe and sane way to try and handle the situation. It probably will sound like we had an extremely grumpy Finance Committee, but we didn't. But we were extremely concerned under this item, not just about the overall position, but also about the CCG's element of the savings that have got to be achieved in the next financial year. This carried on after the Finance Committee, and Jeff and I had a meeting as the joint chairs of the Finance Committee with Claire last week to go through in a bit more detail about what our concerns were and what we thought needed to be done. We've got to find about £13 million worth of savings in the year. The level of plans to support that are only about £4 or £5 million, and the plans are maybe not as robust as you would normally want to have at this stage in the year. I think we all know the reasons why that is, but it leaves us with an extremely vulnerable position. It would be wrong not to labour the point a little bit more. We haven't done enough to work out where we're going to make significant savings. We're going to have to do something much bigger than just saving 1 or 2 posts. And I think we also have to reflect on the fact that in a good year, we only save about 80% of what we aim to do. Therefore, if we need to save £13 million, we need to have a target well in excess of that if we're going to deliver our share of the burden for the whole of the system's financial position. And I think that really will be something that we're looking to executives to take urgent action on, to report back to the governing body in the May meeting to say where we're going to deliver this. Because once the initial Q1 phase of the financial plan is resolved, we'll have obviously much less of the financial year to make changes in. And that really does cause me additional concern. So I think we could be looking for something way north of £18 million as a list of schemes. And obviously having to give notice on lots of things, or if we're having to make big changes to the way we organise ourselves, that's not easy to do. And we have very little, if not no time to get some of this stuff sorted. And that causes the Finance Committee, and Jeff and I in particular, grave concern.
Where is information on that? When's that coming back to the board then about that? This doesn't show that, does it? This paper doesn't mention anything to do with that. So you wouldn't, from reading this paper, you would have thought, that's fine, we're going to get given this amount of money, we spend this amount, we're going to have a bit of a deficit, job's done, no worries about savings.
Q1 position, because this paper is purely looking at 3 months, there's a working assumption that QIP will not be fully operational. So because we haven't seen the numbers, we don't know what that means yet, but there is an expectation that there's likely to be a ramp up. The planning for the annual period, we've got something in the pipeline for Finance Committee this month, and part of that will be to enable a discussion about what actions we are taking to address that, and to be able to articulate the areas that we're looking at and how we're going to do that. So that's for discussion at the end of this month. So obviously it'll be reported at next governing body, but with that being in May, there may well have been more progress still. I have asked for a slot on the development session agenda at the end of March, because I just think keeping governing body members briefed, even informally, is important at this stage, because things are moving at quite a pace. So I will keep the full board briefed through the informal channels as well as the formal ones.
Okay, thank you. That sounds good. Any more questions for us to note the contents of the report, but then also make a decision and support the Q1 operational budget for use in the CCG? until guidance is received. So I assume we're all happy to support that proposal to use that budget. Fine. Thank you very much, Claire. And then we've got a COVID-19 update from Sam, Julie and Steve, a verbal update, I think. It's a shame that it's not written, but I suppose it's changing quite quickly. Sam, I think you're there. There's a black square with your name on, so I assume you are here. Possibly not. Is there anybody in there? I've not had any messages that Sam, I think, don't know whether Sam is trying to speak or whether she's blocked. Dave, do you have any? I'm not even sure we've got Dave at the moment, have we? So have we got Julie? Oh, Sam's waiting back in.
Sam's trying to get back in.
I don't know where Dave's gone. Dave appears to not be here. I mean, unless I'm missing him. It's hard trying to scroll down the list on this big screen and work out who isn't here. But
can you hear me, Julian?
I can hear you now. We had lost you for a while. You were a black square with no picture or sound. And then
interesting. Unfortunately for me, I can see my face on the screen quite large, so I'm going to switch my camera off. I've dialed in on my phone for the audio, so hopefully you can at least hear me.
Yes, we can. We were saying that this is the COVID update.
Yes.
That is verbal. That we would possibly have written one might have been good, but we're happy that it's dynamic and changing. So. A verbal update is much appreciated from you, and I know you and Julie have been in gold this morning.
It is dynamic and changing, yes. It continues to move on a daily basis. So
still, I think the board does need written updates at times about this. You know, I think would it be better to have a written update that's then updated rather than just a pure verbal update. But I'll leave that to John to discuss for May, but that's brilliant you're here. So I think we have lost Dave at the moment, so he was having problems connecting, I think, as well, but I assume he might be lost. So if you want to start then, Sam.
Yep, okay. So I am pleased to report that it is an improving picture. So I'm sure some of my colleagues will jump in and give a bit more detail around some of the specific areas, but in terms of our prevalence rates, they are improving. So for Telford and Wrekin, we are at a rate of 51 per 100,000 of population, and for Shropshire, 49.8. So we're just edging under that 50 per 100,000 mark. So we have seen some good improvements in those figures over recent times. And we obviously hope that continues. So we are proceeding, though, with a note of caution on the awareness that as lockdown measures ease, that may have an impact on this downward trajectory. So clearly, all our planning and work at the moment is with that caveat in mind. In terms of the position at SATH, again, as you would expect, sort of tracking through from those prevalence rates in the community coming down, we are seeing improvements in terms of COVID numbers across all elements within the trust, and particularly in ITU, those numbers reducing now quite nicely. So in terms of the de-escalation plans that we put in place and the triggers around how we would start to look at restoring services, repatriating staff back to their usual day job where they've been redeployed to support COVID, we have been in a position to initiate that in line with our plans. So that's an excellent position to be in. In terms of the community position, our community capacity remains good. COVID numbers within community hospital settings are now down in the low single figures. So that's also looking very positive. In terms of the vaccination programme, clearly there's a significant amount of activity underway with the programme moving forward day by day. So the current figures as of midnight last night are that we had vaccinated just over 208,000 people. So now in striking distance really of hitting that 50% of the population mark in the not too distant future. So a massive achievement all round with that programme. In terms of those vaccination cohorts, so the different cohorts set out in the JCVI guidance, for all those above 65 years old, those cohorts, the uptake level is now above 90%, with some of those cohorts reaching 100%. For the 60 to 64 cohort, we are now above 80% vaccinated. And for the 55 to 59 cohort, which commenced only this week, we are now up above 45% uptake. So we are expecting the 50 to 54 cohort to open up next week, with the ambition that all of our over 50s will be vaccinated by the end of March. We are expecting vaccination supply to increase from next week, so there'll be a further ramp up in terms of activity through the programme. This also includes the commencement of second doses, so that's now fully part of our programme as we go forward. And we're also now looking at the planning that we need to do in terms of rolling out the programme to the under 50s group, which, as you can anticipate, is rather a large group of people. Also looking to the future in terms of what the vaccination programme might look like going into the autumn and winter, and how that might run, and obviously taking into consideration the alignment with the flu vaccination programme, and also the longer term modelling in terms of the best way to deliver the programme into the future. So still plenty of work going on. Still being cautious in terms of our planning, and starting to work through the restoration and recovery of services, given that the COVID picture is looking more positive. But we are proceeding with caution, as I mentioned. So I will defer to my public health colleagues for more detail in terms of the prevalence rates, and Julie in terms of the demand and capacity picture, if there's anything that they would like to add.
I think we've just lost Rachel, Sam, but I know Liz is with us. So do you want to raise anything from Telford and Wrekin, Liz, before I move on to the other demand and capacity piece?
Just to say, you know, yes, it is good news in terms of our infection rates coming down to just over 50 per 100,000. That's a 64% reduction in cases in the last week, but as Sam said, we do need to be cautious in terms of going forward. What we've had in Telford and Wrekin is a long, slow and bumpy decline, and those bumps are the outbreaks, and we've had significant outbreaks in a number of workplaces over the last few weeks, months, and in a sense those will continue, so we will still continue to have those cases and outbreaks going forward. So everybody needs to still follow the rules, and we need to work closely with our workplaces in terms of trying to make sure they're COVID secure, and in terms of making sure they report cases and isolate contacts as appropriate. So it is good news, but as Sam says, we do need to be cautious going forward. Thank you.
No, thank you for that, Liz. No, that is positive news, but as you say, it's still important that everyone sticks to the advice and the guidelines even after they've had their immunisations. Julie, I think we have.
Thanks, Julian. Just really building on what Sam had said, we have now that because we've got down to the triggers and the de-escalation plan is on schedule. We're now we're reducing the acute demand and capacity meeting. We are going to carry on meeting once a week, and that's just to continue to monitor underlying trends. As Liz said, there's still some anxiety, particularly around the workplace, and obviously as schools go back and then we gradually get out of lockdown, what that does and what that if you like, that residual COVID demand is going to look like while we wait for the full effect of the vaccination programme to be felt. So I think that we felt that was prudent to keep that going through until the end of April and then review that position then. So that's where we are in terms of the COVID and the planning. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with regard to the restore and recovery, our providers have now restarted their weekly restore and recovery meetings again. So we're not trying to make an industry out of it. We're trying to keep it as lean as possible. I'll be then holding a system elective and cancer recovery meeting at the end of the month to consolidate our provider position, but also look at our responsible population, because obviously we do have patients that go out of area for treatment, so we need to ensure that they're part of our overall recovery plans, and that's with the intention of them being able to report formally through our committee structure from April onwards in terms of that restore and recovery programme.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from John. I see Rachel put a comment she had to go, so Rachel's hasn't dropped off. She's left the meeting, so that's fine. John.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, very good news on both fronts, prevalence and vaccination. We received communication from Amanda Pritchard, I think, in the last week or so, really asking systems to look at staff uptake of the vaccinations. I know some areas such as London have been lower than expected, and I don't know whether we have any particular issue in Shropshire over staff vaccination uptake, but it was just really whether any work had been done, just checking in on that. I think there was some resources looking at reminders for staff in terms of the actions they can take in terms of IPC as well within the workplace, just to ensure that we keep that message going, even though we're in a good place, to make sure that message is constantly enforced to try and reduce our nosocomial infection rate. So it's really a question: has that part of the work been covered?
Yes, so we do have relatively good uptake from staff. I don't have specific numbers with me, but our HR directors group is working on this continually in terms of going back around the loop for staff that haven't taken up the vaccine, to ensure that that dialogue is ongoing, as we are doing for all groups within our population, to be fair, continuing to revisit any individuals who may not have taken up the vaccine for whatever reason previously. There has been new guidance issued from NHS England in terms of how we can manage staff who have so far declined to take the vaccine, how we enter into supportive conversations with them, how we undertake appropriate risk assessments in order to make sure that they are working in appropriate ways if they haven't been vaccinated, and just generally how we manage that approach. But we are very clear that we are continuing to have those conversations with staff if they have to date not taken up the vaccine, to continue promoting that we think that is the best option.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few people with further questions, but Liz was put a hand up. So I assume this is about this, Liz, is it? Did you want to come in at this point? You're on mute, sorry.
It was just the other inequalities question in terms of having a system-wide group in terms of looking at vaccine hesitancy in different groups, particularly in our population. So I'm chairing that group, being supported by a range of partners, and we've got some sort of innovation in terms of that area. But I just wanted to flag that the CCG now has health inequalities funding to support uptake of immunisation for our most hesitant groups in our population. And therefore, I've asked Helen Onions and Bernie Lee to work with Claire Parker in terms of getting that plan together and ways to use that funding.
Yeah, that's very important to use that funding. I did see that being announced. It's important to have that. That's good. I've got Deborah, then Meredith, and then Donna, I think.
Thanks, Julian. I just wanted to ask about the vaccination programme, and obviously the supplies of the vaccine are expected to ramp up, and that will be important as we have to deliver second doses as well as continuing to roll out the first doses. How confident are we that we can staff this? I'm aware that sometimes staffing the national vaccine centres is challenging, and obviously as prevalence decreases, some of those staff are redeployed and will return to their usual day jobs, and the day jobs will likely get busier as we implement our recovery and restore programmes. So will they still have capacity to support the vaccine programme as well, or have we thought about other ways that we can address this?
Yes, so the modelling that we're doing at the moment would suggest that we do have the workforce to continue to deliver it. It is something that we are continually monitoring and planning around, because yes, we do have staff that are deployed into the programme from other NHS services who will need to go back over the coming weeks. So it is a constant piece of work that we're revisiting in terms of innovative ways to bring staff in, volunteers to support, etc., etc. So it is an ongoing piece of work. At the moment, the position is such that we believe we have the workforce going forward, but clearly we are monitoring that really on a day-by-day basis.
Okay, thank you. Meredith?
Yeah, Deborah's picked up my question. I think I was just wanting a bit of clarification. Sam, you did say that we would be getting more supply of vaccine in, and I was inferring from that there might not have been enough to up until now. And I know that some sessions at various venues haven't been running morning and afternoon shifts and so forth. So I just wondered if the greater supply that's coming in is to take account of the greater flow of people in, or if we've actually had a shortage recently.
I wouldn't call it a shortage necessarily, but the supplies have been less over the last couple of weeks. This was anticipated. We knew nationally that supplies would reduce for 2 to 3 weeks around this period, and then increase again. So it's not a surprise. We knew this was going to happen. It's a national position, but yes, supplies will increase. I suppose you could say supplies would increase back to previous levels prior to that dip, but then also be supplemented with additional vaccine supply, given the second doses to factor in, and also the sort of expansion into the under 50s cohort with that large number of population.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And can I just say thank you very much to you and to Liz and Rachel in particular. The work has been fantastic. Thank you.
So, I think on the national call, it's that the weekly numbers on average going from 2.6 million to 4 million nationally for vaccines. So obviously that is an increase, and that's to account for the second dose and the widening groups. But now I would reiterate your thanks to everyone who's doing that, and also all the staff and volunteers and everyone who's already said in his introduction who we couldn't do without, and also all the venues that have been set up and everything. So it's a massive logistical thing that's going to go on for quite some time. Donna, I think you're
thank you, Julian. Great minds think alike, because there was one question of mine which was very similar to Meredith's and Deborah's, but just great news on the uptake figures that Sam presented. The sort of above 80% or above 90% in some instances, the cohorts. I just wondered if there is any further breakdown in some of our groups, our BAME communities, most deprived, if there are any noticeable differences or any inequity that we're seeing there.
So this is part of the report that comes round to the governing body each week on a Tuesday evening. So we do have those figures periodically. The uptake in the BAME community is now looking very good. And as Liz has referred to, there is a group looking particularly at the sort of uptake in terms of inequalities and how we address that, and some very proactive work going on, and some innovative ways of approaching that, not only in terms of BAME, but also across a range of inequalities elements. So last time I checked, we were above 75% uptake in our BAME communities. So we are talking about a few hundred individuals in those groups left to vaccinate. So some significant progress being made there, and I will continue to supply the data.
Thank you, Sam. Move on in a minute, but we've got Mike who's got Mike. Is this a final point from Mike?
Yes, from work point of view, we're still getting lots of phone calls about people and second doses and wanting not to go back to the same place. So lots of queries from different areas saying, why aren't they vulnerable? But that was my question. What has happened about the virtual ward? Because that's not been mentioned, because it was being underused the last time we talked, and we were going to look into what was going on there. So is there any update on the virtual ward, or is that now shut?
No, the virtual ward is still with us, and we hope will continue to be with us. There's a review going on at the moment, which will report next week in terms of how we might expand the use of that, which has been less than we would have hoped. So we're working with regional colleagues, with NHS England, and with locally with clinicians and managers to do that review and understand how we might increase the usage of the virtual ward to the levels that we might have expected when we originally put it in place.
Okay, thank you. Adam, this must be the final comment. Final comment.
Just a virtual ward point. I don't understand why there's an age thing of over 65s or vulnerable. Why would a 64-year-old with the same health condition not be eligible for a service that we're underusing? Limiting it to a subsector of the population seems a bit odd, and I would have thought the risks for younger people would be smaller than the risks for older people.
Yes, and without getting into specific details here, all of those things are being looked at. Certainly the referral criteria was felt to potentially be a bit too tight and needed to be revisited, so that's all part of the review.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for that thorough verbal update. That's brilliant. I think we'll push back the next paper and have our break now. We're ready to have a break at 10 past 11 for 15 minutes. So it's now nearly 20 past. So I suppose if we have a quarter of an hour break and start again at 25 to. So we can 2103-444, bridging arrangements for GPIT futures. After talking to Dave and just very briefly to Keith, my proposal is that although there is a potential conflict of interest around GP partners, that it would be fine for GPs to partners be part of the discussion, but if there's the vote won't include GPs. Jeff, I didn't manage to ring you, but I trust you'll be happy with that as well from a Telford point of view. Yeah, no, I assume so. Jeff didn't. That's fine. So, Claire, do you want to kick off then with your paper?
Yes, thank you. So, people may be familiar with what used to be the GP system of choice framework, which was the national framework that we procured our main GP systems through. Some time ago now, the national NHS digital team decided to revamp that, and in the new world it's called the GPIT Futures framework. Now, planning for a transition to that new framework started a good couple of years ago. We've known it's coming, we've seen lots of information on it. And so when the transition started last January, some time-limited agreements were put in place to allow CCGs to do what they needed to do in terms of a procurement exercise, and for NHS Digital to get all of the framework bolted down as it needed to be. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and we've got delays now both at national level and for all CCGs. So the paper describes the process that NHSD have been through to enable us to put arrangements in place for a further bridging period whilst both the national team conclude on the framework negotiations and then the CCG are able to go through the procurement exercise that we would have been doing earlier but haven't been able to because of the incompleteness of the framework. So all of the work's been done for us in the background through the digital team, working very closely with our IT team. Thankfully, the bridging agreements are not suggesting any changes to our current arrangements, so that does simplify things for this interim period. But we do need governing body sign-off to be able to proceed and sign those agreements. The paper does highlight that there is a cost pressure in comparison to our current CCG budgets. That's been known about for some time now. So previously, the budget was held centrally. So whilst CCGs were able to make a decision about what we took from the framework, the pressures or benefits of those funding decisions were held centrally. Those budgets have now been pushed down to CCGs. So we've had in our financial planning for a couple of years now the cover for funding the contracts at their existing levels, and then what we'll be looking to do through the procurement exercise is see what efficiencies we can draw out of that. We've also got a larger scale review going on of our IT budgets at the moment anyway in terms of looking at efficiencies, so we're confident that we'll be able to manage those budgets effectively. But yes, so today very much looking for support just to get these agreements signed off so that we've still got lawful arrangements in place for the contracts that we've got. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Keith.
I'm happy to support this, Claire. It makes sense. I was just a bit concerned about the wording with the sentence at the end of paragraph 1, which says no legally compliant route to extend. Can I just clarify that what that should say is no legally compliant route to extend. However, this arrangement puts us clear legally. Is that what it should say?
Yes, there's no legal basis to extend the existing arrangement, but the production of the new arrangements is the lawful way to do it.
I was sure that's what it meant. I just wanted to be 100% clear for the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Donna?
Yeah, I also agree that this is the right thing that we should be doing. I suppose just in terms of acknowledging this was up to 18 months and just asking the timing of any procurement and whether we're going to be having the capacity and we've got that in planned.
Yeah, it's in our plans at the moment. The only thing we can't do is put a firm start date on because it's dependent on NHSD opening up the framework, but we're working very closely with them and badgering them regularly to work out when that'll be, but we are geared up to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Meredith?
Thank you. Similar area, actually, just to say, yeah, this all makes sense. But in paragraph 4, Claire, there's a reference to procurement expecting to be within this time frame. From what I understand, you're saying the expecting should say required to be in that time frame. There's no option about it, is there?
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, I assume then people are happy with that, to support that. To approve the sign off the call off order for the suppliers listed in table 1, the bridging arrangements ahead of full procurement. Good, no, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Claire. And we move on to update on system improvement plan, which has got Dave's name next to it and Steve Trenchard's name next to it.
Thanks, Julian. Sorry, I'm just, I've lost my way in the papers for a second, so I'm just finding the right paper. I thought we were on the single strategic commission.
No, it's more before that. There was a verbal update on the system improvement plan. There is no paper for this, it's just...
That's fine, it's me, sorry. So just in terms of where we are in terms of the system improvement plan, so this is of course linked to SAT's CQC requirements and is linked to SAT's improvement plan itself. The work is ongoing around that. It's been overseen by the SOAG. So I wasn't going to go into particular detail at this stage because we seem to be making the right progress, but happy to take any questions. Steve, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything.
I think just the decision that was taken at the ICS, Dave and colleagues, which is to align the system improvement plan with the ICS submission in terms of the key pieces of work that needs to go in that. And I think what we want to see through SOAG is a single plan that incorporates I think a number of aspects, an alignment to the first 6 months, which was the winter schemes. And as Sam said, those are being evaluated by PRISM at the moment and coming through next week to the UEC delivery group, and an alignment of the key programmes of system transformation, which David Stout is leading on for the chief executives. So there's a number of pieces of work that have, where the schemes are being developed very, very rapidly. What we'll have in the future is a paper that incorporates all of those with a clear escalation process to describe to governing body members where we're up to with each of those schemes and pieces of work.
Okay, that's fine. And Mike, Matty.
Sorry, Future Fit, where does this fit in this with the system improvement plan? I know there are a few questions in the question bit, but how does it all seems to have gone very quiet? I'm just wondering how that is being played out, because there was money involved there, and I don't know how does that fit with what's going on at the moment with what you're saying.
So in terms of the long term, Mike, clearly, it's called, because it's now moved into the trust, it's called Hospital Transformation Programme rather than Future Fit. Clearly, the Hospital Transformation Programme is the mechanism and means to develop and implement the clinical model as outlined in Future Fit. So the trust have been given £6 million to develop the outline business case. There have been a number of meetings over the last couple of weeks with colleagues in NHS EI and SATH and the system around how we can start to make significant progress around that. And I know, excuse me, I know SATH are about to pull down the first element of that 6 million to enable them to develop the outline business case. That will include, of course, schedules of accommodation to a fairly significant degree, but is about implementing the clinical model, which is will address some of the concerns in relation to the CQC and sustainability of clinical services in the longer term. But nonetheless, we need to address some of those concerns in the short to medium term as well.
So is that a good thing? For clarity, HTP doesn't sit within the system improvement plan, but parts of system improvement plan are dependent on HTP.
Correct.
Yeah. So do you feel that's progress then?
I feel it is making progress, but probably not as quickly as we would have liked. But part of the problem was the trust didn't have the money to develop the OBC. That has been cleared now. And as I say, they are going to start drawing down the first tranche of that 6 million imminently.
That's good news then, I presume. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about the system improvement plan? So do we, because we've seen the system improvement plan already here, haven't we? Or we've seen did that come to the board? I think it did, didn't it?
It has done, yes.
Yeah. So do we need that what you're saying, Steve Trenchard, that's going to come back to the board with a sort of a rating of how we're progressing against each of the actions in there? Because there were some specific points in there for the CCG, weren't there? And there's some others, but
yes. So we'll bring that back. It's what we're doing is aligning those various schemes into one plan, and that would include the HTP as one of the key system priorities. So we can see an update against each of those.
Okay, so will that come back to the May board, or would it be the one after that?
I can go back to the May board. Happy with that.
May. John's happy with that. It won't be me.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much for that, Dave and Steve. Thank you. Dave, we then move on to your paper, which is the update on the single strategic commissioner.
Thanks, Julian. And I was obviously ahead of myself on the agenda, so apologies for that. So just in relation to this paper, it sets out, and I'm going to take it as read, it sets out where we are and seeks ratification for the next stage. As everyone knows, we are due to become a single organisation and single strategic commissioner from the 1st of April. We've been having workshops jointly with the two boards since August last year, facilitated by Deloitte, and I know most board members have been able to partake or participate in all of those, and some just in some. So it is about trying to just lay out where we are in terms of the paper, and it seeks board approval to in terms of the purpose statement and strategic priorities which are outlined above, which are particularly around ensuring that we understand the health needs of our population, and that we address health inequalities and reduce health inequalities moving forward as a single strategic commissioner, to make sure that we participate and support and facilitate joint system working with a shared vision, purpose and narrative for the system. Financial balance, obviously, both as a single strategic commissioner, but increasingly as a system, and that we commission improvements in health outcomes in terms of quality and safety. So I wasn't going to say any more than that, Julian, really, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Fine. Any questions? Deborah, please.
Yeah, I'm probably being a bit pedantic here, but looking at the purpose statement, I think we need to qualify or describe the healthcare outcomes that we're looking for. We will indeed identify healthcare outcomes, but we haven't necessarily said that we're looking for better or improved or ambitious health outcomes. You could, if you were going to be really awkward, say we're going to look for terrible healthcare outcomes. So I think we just need something in there that says we want to improve our healthcare outcomes.
Point taken, Deborah. Can I suggest we amend that? We will identify improvements to health outcomes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? I mean, I think then that's really within the strategic priorities that further defines the sort of work that will be done, doesn't it? So it sort of does imply if you read the two together, but I agree that that makes it simpler if you just see the purpose statement. Any other? Meredith, sorry.
Thanks, Julian. So it was. I know language is a preference thing, but there seems to be quite a lot in here that doesn't really stack up very well for me anyway. So first of all, the tense seems peculiar. I don't know that our purpose is to do something in the future. I'm sure our purpose is to do it today and as well as in the future. So I'd want to be taking will out of it all the way through. Secondly, the term ensuring, I'm very uncomfortable whenever I see ensure or ensuring. We might strive to or aim to, but we can't ensure. And indeed, we may even decide we have to make some cuts to services which will prohibit us from making sure services are available. So that's that. We will hold healthcare providers to account, but there's nothing in there about holding them to account for the services that we have commissioned. I don't know that we can hold every provider to account on everything, even if we've commissioned it or not. So that just felt wrong. Yeah, and then the strategic priorities seemed, you know, I don't want to go through it all, Julian, but I just felt it was quite a jumble. So anyway,
the workshop, weren't they? I think these were developed involving the board.
They were ideas that came out of discussions. That I don't know if the word developed is quite what I'd say.
I think part of the difficulty here, Meredith, of course, is we're operating today as two boards meeting jointly, and we are shaping the vision and purpose of a new organisation that technically doesn't yet exist. So I think the challenge around this has been trying to get the balance right between what we as current board members can commit to the future boards to, although I fully accept that most of the current board members will be board members on the new board, but technically it's that technicality that we're trying to find the balance across.
Yeah, I guess I totally understand that, Dave, and that's a fair comment. I suppose my query is, if we approve these today, what does that mean? Do we look at them again on the 1st of April when we're a single organisation, or what's the next step?
I would certainly be recommending that the new organisation reviews these fairly quickly. It doesn't necessarily have to do them on the 1st of April, but I would have thought within the first couple of board meetings to see whether the new organisation felt these were still relevant and appropriate, or whether they wanted to change them.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine, Dave. I think I'd be quoting Eric Morecambe here. I think all the words are right. It's just possibly the order that's the issue. But anyway, I'll stop now. Thank you very much.
Liz.
I mean, I tend to agree that I think all the words are there, but not necessarily in the right order. I think that's a good phrase. But one of the highlights, one of the things I wanted to highlight was improvement in health outcomes. I think we've covered off earlier, but reduction in health inequalities. It isn't just about the commissioning of services. I know that's primarily what your role is, but actually your partnership working, your role as an anchor institution, there's all sorts of other ways that you can reduce health inequalities. So I don't think that broader partnership working with a range of partners is truly reflected in those strategic outcomes. It does feel very NHS-y.
I think one of the problems we've had in developing it, I've always wanted us to take time to do them bottom up, involving the whole staff and involving patients and members. But in reality, we always run out of time, or we run out of other obstacles. So the obstacle now is clearly that in a year's time, the CCG will be having its last meeting ever, most likely. And if we wait more than 2 meetings to redefine them, then in reality, that's 4 months, because it's every other meeting. The objectives will be very different. So I would agree with you, Liz, that they're not perfect. They don't reflect the partnership working, and they are quite NHS-y, but I suppose they are the initial strategic outcomes and purpose statement of a new body, isn't it? I think that's probably the bit to reflect that they need to be adapted and changed. But they have been, I say, whether they're developed or whether they've just come out of a discussion, is sort of it is a debate. But I mean, they certainly came out of a board workshop where they were kicked around a bit, and I'm not sure we can within this meeting we've got the space or time to alter it again, as we spent a whole sort of a half a day doing it before. So I think what you and Meredith are saying are correct, and what Dave's saying is correct, that they are for the new CCG to then sort of look at and adapt and sort of change. So I wonder whether we approve them as they are now, but in the context that the new organisation will want to look at them as soon as possible, within its sort of within its structure, within its sort of timetable of work, and decide that it's still appropriate, because it might be our purpose statement for the next year would be to protect commissioning and to help establish the new ICS. I mean, so there would be very different priorities with a different setting, knowing that there's only a year left for all CCGs. So Dave, what do you propose? We add in the improving healthcare outcomes?
I think we should add in the improving healthcare outcomes, Julian. I would support your view that these do need to be reviewed in light of where the commissioning landscape is going, and that it will be a new organisation after the 1st of April, sorry.
So perhaps point 2, to be support and approve the purpose statement and strategic priorities outlined above for recommendation for review by the new CCG governing body.
I'm happy to amend to that.
Would that suit John?
Yes, I'd support that approach, and perhaps the statement and the priorities could be looked at actively within a development session, potentially in April, even as early as that, so that they could be ready to be represented in May. Is that felt to be a reasonable approach?
I'd be comfortable with that, John. It's a bit difficult for me to say. In one sense, it's difficult for me to say that because I'm committing other people to doing it.
Yes,
but I do think that's sensible.
The broader one to the board to see whether there was a reaction for that.
Yeah, just to say, John, I think that is a good idea. The only thing I'd say is that doing it in a large group is very, very difficult. I'd recommend Alison gets a small group of people together to come up with something rather than go forward to further work.
Yeah, with Steve's comment about I think that would be the ideal. Has always been that we're going to sit down and have a series of workshops to develop a sort of organisational sort of objectives and priorities. But it is just the time and the space. And as I say, the idea was that it would be done by the new CCG. And the time before, we thought we only had limited time until a new CCG was here, but obviously now the new CCG only has limited time in itself. So yeah, so I think if we adopt the words that put that for recommend for consideration by the new CCG,
and then we can take it from there. Yeah.
So that could be your point, Steve. I can see your comment about why the CCG involved.
Yeah, I suppose my nervousness about setting a date too soon is that we need to absolutely do it, but one of our collective challenges in the new CCG is to role model good, effective engagement that we want to see our people do in the system space. So this is an opportunity where we can do some of that co-production with our own people, and fully support the improvement and also the partnership working. The partnership working and the leadership at all levels in the CCG is going to be critical for the new ICS. So I am quite nervous about a set of values that are just imposed from board onto the organisation, and not that's a sort of a joining up, isn't it, someplace? It doesn't have to be a long process, but it needs to be done, I think.
I don't think I was going to say we're not going to put a date on the new organisation now, just that we'll opt the thing rather than final adoption, but for recommendation for review by the new CCG post 1st of April. So just, yeah. So if we're happy to alter those words, we're happy with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Then move on to Zena, who's presenting a paper on the patient safety specialists.
Yes, so this is an update. A paper was brought to board in November last year, introducing the requirement for a patient safety specialist, and the CCG has invested in resource to allow that to be recruited to. This paper just brings an update on where we've got to over the last quarter or so. And since that time, nationally there's been a review of the patient safety strategy, and that was published in February, and it's appended in the papers for information. I'm not going to go through that blow by blow. But there has been a shift in scope, really, to recognise some of the wider determinants of health inequalities around diversity and inclusion, and makes reference to certain vulnerable groups as well, being of particular need to have the playing field levelled, really. So the national update is there for information. Some of the ambition has, as I say, been reframed to take account of those newly recognised and prioritised elements. There's some information on training, as much as we have it, really, and we've been part of shaping up part of the consultation group to determine the content of the training, and it's envisaged this year there will be a module for all staff to undertake, and then later on in July this year there'll be the first of a number of modules for the patient safety specialists specifically that they will be required to undertake. In terms of our local update, then, as I say, we have got funding for this post substantively moving forward, but recruitment has been delayed due to the CCG management of change processes as we come together as one organisation. And because of that, we haven't been able to progress at the pace we would have wished to, but also bearing in mind this is a system piece, I suspect partners and the system would not have been able to respond because of the COVID activity in any case. But we have maintained our local system meeting, and we've got further ones scheduled. And that system meeting will be the platform to deliver the strategy, and will report onwards and upwards to the ICS Quality and Safety Committee in due course as that is shaped up. So we have made some progress. The recommendation to this meeting is that you note the content of the report, the delay to recruitment that we're now out to advert and hoping to recruit to, and to just approve that we bring regular updates on a biannual basis, so 6 monthly, to this meeting.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Zina. Very comprehensive. Any questions or concerns about that, or comments? No, other than that, no. We note it, that we note the delay, and we're I think coming 6 monthly is a is a good plan. That'd be good. Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's move on to Alison. Alison is here now. That's brilliant. To the joint board assurance framework.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not going to go into any detail. I think the report's self-explanatory. Just to highlight that there have been some discussions at the Audit Committee's meeting in common about how we allocate specific risks on the joint interim BAF to committees where it's pertinent, or retain them at governing body meetings and the new governing body going forward. And that's listed in the report for consideration and hopefully approval by the two governing bodies today. Happy to take any questions, and I'm sure other colleagues can answer for their particular risks.
Thank you. Questions about the board assurance framework? Zina.
Just a comment. I think as some of the line of section 2 is not quite made it to the printing pack. It just probably needed expanding a little bit further. It is in, just find the page, just on page 131 of the pack, on risk number 2.
Yeah.
Column 7. There is just a little bit more. I added a couple of bits in around assurance.
It's 10 maternity and then it ends, isn't it?
Yeah, there are some more words beyond that.
So what words, can you remember what you've not got those to hand now? Or
I can find them in a moment, and I will put them in the chat.
And by assigning them to a committee, Alison, what does that mean?
That means that they're getting particular focus on a regular basis over and above audit committee from the committee that is designated with looking at that particular area of statutory responsibility for the CCG. So it's very much a belt and braces approach, that obviously the audit committee are taking a view on behalf of the governing body of the whole process and the strategic nature of the risks and how they're being managed. But each committee, for their allocated risks, is looking in more detail about the actual action plans that underpin the assurance to make sure that they're in place and any other actions that's stipulated on there.
The paper will go to each of these committees, highlighting their BAF entries and saying, is this a reasonable summary of what's happening, and are you happy with that? That seems like a good plan, because quite often all these individual elements have all been talked about, haven't they, through the other papers. By the time we reach the BAF, it's almost, now was some talk about a long time ago about basing the meeting around the BAF and using the BAF rather, as another way of doing it rather than doing that, because obviously most of these have been talked about, haven't they? Is there any other questions? Zena, you'll put those comments, will you send those comments to Sandra to update it, and that's probably the best thing to do, isn't it?
Can I suggest that we send out to governing body members the Word version of the document? I think part of this is the PDFing of documents. The formatting goes out, and as Zena's quite rightly pointed out, that loses some of the text. So if we send the Word version, so you can see the full extent. Yeah, no, that's good. That's brilliant. So we're seeing your hands still up. That was still about the last bit, presumably. Yeah. So we're asked on behalf of both CCGs to accept and the content of the report and the Appendix A, review the updated strategic risk position and confirm the current level of risk is acceptable, and discuss and approve the suggested allocation of BAF risk committees outlined in section 1.4. And as there's been no comments, I'm sure we're happy with those allocations. Just in the chat. All right, okay, that Zena's put into the chat a bit, would be good. Yeah, no, thank you very much. Then move on now to the paper on the CCG Wellbeing Guardian. Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm not going to go into any detail. Clearly, there is a requirement now for a wellbeing champion in NHS trusts and organisations that's been outlined in the NHS People Plan 2020-21. We are proposing that Meredith Vivian, who has volunteered to undertake this role for our 2 CCGs currently, but obviously going into the new CCG on the 1st of April, and looking for approval from the 2 governing bodies today. Any questions? I'm just going to question, what does it mean in practical terms? What is the Wellbeing Guardian and what will Meredith do? So I think it's safe to say, having been on a webinar around this, Meredith and I both attended, it's a developing picture. They have not got a prescribed role definition currently. That I think they're leaving it up to organisations to mould this role for their own particular situations, which is probably the right approach, given that trusts will take a slightly different approach to this, given the numbers of staff that they employ and the level of risks around their staff wellbeing, particularly at the moment with COVID-19, that they will want this role to do specific actions and undertake specific responsibilities. I think the situation is different for a CCG, where we're not clinically facing, we're not frontline facing, but still we have staff who are under a lot of pressure, and we need to make sure that they are enabled to perform to their best ability within the situation we've got now, but going forward. So the role is very much as the voice on the governing body around wellbeing of staff. So if anything is coming to the governing body, whether it's directly related to wellbeing of staff, whether that's HR issues, or if it's indirectly with issues around how we're commissioning something that might have a slant on staff wellbeing, that that guardian role is making sure that it's highlighted to the governing body, and we take that into account when any decisions are being made. And if there are risks around it, that we've explored what those risks are and we've mitigated as much as we possibly can for the situation that's being presented. So I think for us, having spoken to Meredith about this, that is the foremost kind of role that we're asking the Wellbeing Guardian to undertake within the CCGs. Meredith, are you happy with that? That's the
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Yeah, that's a very good summary. I mean, I think what I'd be interested in is if we're doing anything in the organisation, a question would be, well, so what does this mean for our staff? What's the impact on our staff, and how, and what's the evidence to support our view on how staff are feeling about this? So it's an ongoing thing. I think I'd like to see some sort of report that comes to the board, maybe once or twice a year, which gives us a sense of the well-being of our staff. I think that would be an important bit of accountability to put in place, but it's not fully fleshed out yet.
Sounds, I suppose it's how you measure the well-being, isn't it? Because we do
very much so. Yeah.
Report that comes telling about sick leave and staff numbers, don't we? But that's quite different to actually saying their well-being, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so, and there may be something to be said, and I haven't discussed this with Alison, but linking this to the patient survey as well. Not the patient survey, staff surveys.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. So we're asked to appoint Meredith as the who is already the lay member PPI and deputy chair, but to appoint him as the new CCG Wellbeing Guardian until the end of his term as tenure as governing body member. So that's on behalf of both CCGs for today, and then for next month on behalf of the new CCG Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. So I assume we're happy to do that. Thank you very much. Now follows a series of reports, sort of information, and I presume people will have read them. There's the Audit Committee in common from 20th of January, the Joint Strategic Commissioning Committee from the 20th of January, the Finance Committee in common from the 27th of January, the Quality Performance Committees in common from the 27th of January, and then for Shropshire CCG, the South Locality the 6th of January, the Shrewsbury Action Locality on the 21st of January, and the North Locality on the 28th of January, and then for Telford and Wrekin CCG only, the practice forum that was on the 19th of January 21. So I'm not sure, Keith, if there's anything you want to say about the audit committee, because sometimes there's stuff to say about that, or there's other questions about any of the other ones. I know Barrett is with his hands up. If I come to Keith first.
No, I think it says as much as needs saying about the audit committee. There is nothing I need to add to that, Julian. Thank you.
That's right, Meredith.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I just wanted to check something. In the Joint Strategic Commissioning Committee notes, there's reference to Shropshire Care Closer to Home and how it's become subsumed under the Shropshire Integrated Place programme. And I just wanted to get a quick update because it feels as I may be just unsighted on it, but it is all of that work seems to have kind of dwindled.
Well, Dave, who's the best person for an update?
Sorry, Julian. I think it's probably Deborah, although Steve may want to chip in.
Oh, Deborah's got a hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Meredith, the SHIP board hasn't met since the first meeting in January. I have had a handover meeting with the new chairs going forward, and I believe they're planning to make the next meeting in April. Care Closer to Home will become a programme of work that's delivered and overseen by that board. I don't believe there's been any real activity on that yet. And one of the things we are waiting, and this is something that Steve might be able to update us on, was the decision or discussion at JSCC about whether or not we felt we needed to procure that, or whether we were happy to go ahead and commission it from providers. And I think that's been one of the things that's been holding it up. So I'd be looking for that. But yeah, you haven't missed anything. And I believe they're planning the next meeting to be in April once they've really worked out the new chairs what they think their programme of work and next action should be. I think we've spent quite a long time working through the terms of reference and the change from the Care Close to Home programme board to the partnership, the integrated place partnership structure and purpose, and I know that the new chairs, now we've done all that work, they are really keen to move forward with an actual programme of action. So hopefully you should see things moving forward.
Thank you. Steve, anything to add? Or
just to add, I think, which is that the one of the big ticket items for the system is the out of hospital community model, and that is aligned to our previous conversation around the future fit work. In terms of the investment, that's being looked at through the System Sustainability Committee, which we will link into, that complies with our current situation, as alluded to in our finance report. So not yet, Deborah, but it's work in progress.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or queries about those papers? If not, we're asked to just do that there for information. There is, for any further business, there is a paper that's been tabled as AOB, which we need to sort of sign off on, which is from Alison. Alison, did you want to talk to the paper, or?
Well, I think it's self-explanatory. Clearly, everybody will be aware that Julie McCabe resigned from her role on the 2 governing bodies as registered nurse in January, which left us with a vacancy. We've completed the recruitment process last week and have offered the appointment to Audrey Warren, who was successful in that interview process. And so this report is just documenting that that's been completed and asking for support on the appointment. Clearly, all of the governing body, the new governing body members of the new CCG will have all of their appointments ratified at the first governing body meeting of the new CCG in April. But I'm looking for support now so that we have it minuted, as we've done with everybody else over the last few months.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're happy to, on behalf of both CCGs, we separate actions to note the appointment of Audrey Warren as registered nurse. So thank you very much. John, did you?
Yeah, thank you. Any other business? Well, I think it's fairly clear to everyone. Today is Julian's last day and a last board meeting as CCG chair in public. And I wanted to really put on record our thanks to you. And really it was, well, where do we start? Where to start with Julian? You know, he's first involved in PCT work back in 2009, then the Shadow CCG board in 2012. He gained promotion to CCG chair in 2015, which coincidentally coincided with the same year in which his football team, Shrewsbury Town, gained promotion to League One. And I just wanted to really look at some of the, notable achievements that Julian's, done in the last over that period of 12 years, and there are too many to list, but there are some very notable achievements, and recently just bringing our 2 CCGs together from concept through the membership, the NHS processes involved, and other large processes, guiding Future Fit from its pre-consultation stage and onwards. Taking part in the development of our STP as it is moving into an ICS. Julian's been a clinical lead and he was part of the process in appointing our independent chair. And in primary care settings, encouraging the process of improving premises development. There are multiple commissioning and procurement achievements that Julian's been involved in. And just to list a few, our community pain clinic service, community ophthalmology, orthopaedic pathways, end-of-life care, overseeing change in mental health services from a hospital to a community-based model, and procurement of our 0 to 25-year-old mental health services provision. But the chair's role is wider than that. It involves many other facets, and Julian's been co-chair of the Shropshire Health and Wellbeing Board. He's a member of the West Midlands Clinical Senate. And yet I think an area that needs particular highlighting has been his development of leadership and encouragement of people. Julian promoted leadership development within the CCG membership, and 2 cohorts of general practitioners went through leadership programs, producing about 12 individuals who've gone on to positions of leadership in our health economy, myself included. And it's been that huge contribution to the development of people, clinical leadership locally, and also his relationships with the membership more widely, the CCG staff, and the organisations around us. And his development of the CCG board roles, clarifying and separating governance from development. Julian's been a CCG chair alongside 5 accountable officers, and by so doing, he's provided the continuity that's been needed and the immense knowledge. And the most remarkable part of this is that he's done this while at the same time being a practicing GP. So, Julian, you are very highly respected in our healthcare community. You've demonstrated ability and effectiveness across both clinical and organisational domains. You've been articulate, providing challenge when needed. You are a true leader. It could be said you're a hard act to follow, but it's worse than that. It wasn't an act at all. It was the real thing. You've set the bar high. You've consistently put healthcare of our population at the centre of decision making. So, as a fellow board member, as a fellow GP, as a friend, I'd like, on behalf of the board, to thank you. So I invite the board to unmute and show our appreciation of all you have done for our CCGs, and to wish you well in your return to full-time general practice.
Thank you very much. It has been a joy most of the time. It's been great working with everyone. It's been brilliant doing this, and I can't promise to listen, but the date of the next time of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 12th of May, and we then have to now resolve that to represent the public are excluded the remainder of the meeting as we close this meeting. So, so thank you very much, John. That's lovely. Thank you very much. I'm very kind of you, and thank you very much for all that applause. It's unexpected, but thank you. And so I'll see you all in part 2 at 1:30. But thank you very much for everything over this period of time.
Thanks, Julian.
Julian, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.